welcome people to the modernization and migration workshop series. We are your hosts. I'm Sam Basu. With me, I have Ed Charbonneau. We are both dev advocates. We have seen things evolve in the .NET space. So we are thinking this might be a good time for all of you to look at the stability of the frameworks and the tooling and try to see how you can move your code bases forward. So this will be a 4-hour workshop. This is today. Hopefully many of you will be able to follow along. We'll slow things down a little bit. Wherever I'm showing you things that have been coded up before, I will point you to GitHub repos where you can get the code. But most of the things that we do today are going to be things that you should be able to follow along. So if you look at modern .NET, let's just begin with, do they still have that site, Ed, just .net? I think they do, yeah. Yep. So if you look at modern .NET, it's not the same monolithic, big framework anymore. It's very nimble. It's cross-platform. It's open source, and it works and runs everywhere. You can target just about every device nowadays. So maybe you have mobile apps and desktop apps that you're trying to modernize. So that's what we'll look at today. For some of the web apps, you have a lot more choices on how you modernize. That's all coming up next week when Ed and I think Jeff Fritz joins us for the next one as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that should be a lot of fun talking about all things ASP.NET and Blazor. Today, we are going to stick to more of the native side of the story, which is desktop apps and mobile apps, but we will bring in some Blazor goodness as well. So if you look
You're
at,
not going to make me write any JavaScript, right, Sam?
No JavaScript. You might see me tinker a little bit with JavaScript because I think that's the reality. I mean, in most people's front-end code bases for web apps. So it's all welcome. It's all welcome in MAUI, so we should be good. So if you look at what we are hoping to cover today, it's going to be a lot of I have a Xamarin app. How do I move forward? What are my benefits? Should I move forward? How do I move forward? Then I have a WPF app. What's my way forward? I have a WinForms app. What's my way forward? I'm starting up a greenfield desktop app. What are my choices? So it's going to be more of a conversation, more of just a strategy type session, and we're going to try to dive into as much code as we can, and hopefully you folks can follow along. So going back to .NET, it's modern and it's here to stay. Since .NET 3.0 ish days, everything is cross-platform, everything works. So .NET is just a folder on your machine, so you can blow it away, reinstall it. So you don't have to go through the huge system-wide installations anymore, and you can package .NET with your apps. So that's nice. So it can be independently hosted. So shipping apps becomes a little bit easier. So a lot of options here, web, desktop, mobile, however you want to do this. So if you want to get on the latest .NETs, so I'm going to hit the download button and see where they take you. Okay, so you have a few choices. So .NET 6 was the last long-term support release. So every November you get a .NET, right? And .NET 7 came out last November, which is a standard release. Again, so that doesn't mean it doesn't have the longevity. It's just the LTS releases are the ones which you are guaranteed 3 years of support. Doesn't mean that the other ones go away any sooner. So .NET 7 is your present production .NET, right? So however you get it on Windows, on Mac. I'm starting out on a Mac here, but I will switch things to a Windows machine in a bit. So .NET 7 is the latest production ready. If you are wanting to stay on the bleeding edge, .NET 8 is also coming out. So this November 2023, you're going to get .NET 8, and we have had about 6-7 previews of .NET 8 so far, and we are getting ready. If you look at the timelines, we are getting ready to be maybe next week to get some RC release candidate bits of .NET 8. So you'll have likely 1, 2, or 3 release candidates, and then we go to GA, general availability of .NET 8 in November. So get the latest .NETs on whichever machine that you are. It's easy to download. If you look at some of the download options, you can do Linux and Mac and Windows, ARM64 or x64. get just the binaries or get the SDKs, and however you want to get it, you go ahead and get it. There are some workloads here that are just nicely divvied up. There are some SDKs, and there are some desktop workloads, and there are some ASP.NET workloads, and .NET MAUI workloads. So workloads are the things that you get in addition to the binaries to get started. So yeah, that's just a high level on all things .NET. Ed, am I missing out saying anything?
I think you covered it pretty well, Sam, and we can install these side by side for the most part, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I actually have a few things installed. I see some of our good friends show up here on chat. Hello, Rocketman. Yeah, we have some good local pizza chains. That's a whole other conversation. Do not get me sidetracked with pizza, because then I can talk about pizza for a long time. So if you have any .NET installed, so I have command line opened up here. So if I do a .NET version, it's going to tell me what my latest .NET version is. So if I do a file new project .NET app, you can see I'm running .NET 8 with a certain preview number to it. So that's what it's going to start using by default. But I also have other .NETs. So I think if I do a .NET list my SDKs, then it's going to tell me that, hey, I have everything from 6 to a couple of versions of 7, and then I have the 8. So absolutely, they can coexist side by side. And even when you have multiple .NETs, you don't have to go with the latest .NETs. You can choose. There are some, configurations that you can do on a per app basis, on a per folder basis, to say, no, go ahead and use .NET 6. That's what I still want to do, or .NET 7. So just because you have .NET 8 installed doesn't mean you have to run on 8 all the time. All right. So let's see.
You've got all the SDKs installed, Sam.
Yeah, I've actually cleaned up a few. I've had a few preview ones as well. Jay Bowman in the chat room, really interested for the ASP.NET Blazor one. Where do you find a link to register? Okay, so like Ed was saying, maybe the easiest one is if I go to Telerik.com, whack, what is it, webinars?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, there you go.
First link there.
Mm-hmm. So this is listed as the second one, but this is actually happening earlier. This is today. So this is the one for the Blazor one that's coming up tomorrow. But don't leave yet, because we will talk about Blazor. That's why I brought Ed on here. This really fun, where we bring in Blazor into MAUI, into WPF, into WinForms. Those are all options for you, good options. Okay, so let's see. There are some friends here. Kurt, who's Rockerman in Columbus, Ohio. I used to live in Columbus, Ohio, so I get the reference here. Now I am in Pennsylvania, and I don't get as good as pizza as we used to in Ohio. Anyways, we're talking about US-centric things here. Some of us are local within the Midwest regions of the United States, but if you're in Europe, I'm sure you have great pizza, better pizza sometimes than us. Anyways, so that's present.NET. You can get the .NETs that you want. So let's start with the mobile front first, right? So let's say you have been running a native mobile app that you've written with Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, or Xamarin.Forms, and you have seen some of the .NET MAUI stuff, and you're considering, is it time enough for me to migrate, or is tooling stable enough? Are the frameworks good enough? What should maybe be some of our considerations? So let's start with Xamarin MAUI story first, and then we'll switch to desktop. Okay. So I am going to start off with .NET MAUI first. So if you have not done any MAUI, if you have been on the fence, just seeing it grow, this is about 3+ years in the making. So the first .NET MAUI platform, and if you do a search on .NET MAUI, this will likely be the page where you land. It's just a landing page. Looks nice with the fonts and some of the gradients. But .NET MAUI came out with kind of midway in between .NET 6 and .NET 7. So I think it was May 2022 is when it came out, and then it kind of evolved a little bit more with .NET 7, and now it's much more grown up, and it's getting ready for .NET 8. So this is stable. Ed and me have a lot of success stories to share where enterprise folks who have huge applications are building desktop first apps with .NET MAUI, right? So the framework is here, it's matured, I think, and tooling wise, we'll talk about Visual Studio and VS Code, some of the other options here, but it's there for you to build modern mobile apps and modern desktop apps. So I'm going to start off here. Again, if you are new to .NET MAUI, get the bits. It says, get started here. So once you do, it's going to tell you, here's how you get, installation on Windows, Mac, or Linux, and here's how you get the binaries and the SDKs. So I'm going to start off here with Visual Studio for Mac, and I know Ed has a few things to say. I have a few things to say as well here, which we'll talk about. But ID-wise, we'll talk about some other options. But let's just open up a brand new .NET MAUI app. And again, if you don't need to follow along, if you want, just do File, New Project. That's what I'm showing you. So if I do a File, New Project here, if you have the modern .NETs installed, if you have the .NET MAUI workloads installed, then you will see a multi-platform app, be it in Visual Studio for Windows or Mac, same exact thing. And if you see these two templates, one is a .NET MAUI app, one is a .NET MAUI app, Blazor Hybrid. If you see these two templates, then you're fine. So that's what I'm doing. I hit continue, and you can choose .NET 7 or .NET 8 based on whatever you have installed, and you get up and going. So once you open up a new project like this, File, New Project, this is kind of what you get. And let me,
Sam, if I don't have those templates, what should I do?
Okay, so you have a couple of options. So if you are on Windows, right? So let's go back here. I think they have Windows versus Mac OS specific things. But if you're on Windows,
two tabs on the left-hand side there.
Yeah, exactly, right. So it actually knows that I'm on Mac, so it tells me that. So the best way to get it on Windows is to get Visual Studio, right? Visual Studio 2022 onwards, you should be able to have a checkbox that says, give me the .NET MAUI workloads, and that's how you get it. If you, for some reason, don't see it, or let's just say you're on a Mac, then there are a couple of things you can do. So if I do a .NET, first up, if you do not see command line like .NET-help or just .NET, you don't have .NET installed. Any modern .NET is going to give you the command line. I think I can do a list my workloads, or I may be getting this wrong. No, I think it's there's a way to list my workloads. Hold on, I have a cheat sheet.
There also on that same page you were just on, there are install instructions under Windows and Mac.
Absolutely. So here's my $1 million cheat sheet of all the commands, because I cannot remember.
I love it. You should share this, Sam. Is this online?
No. Okay, so it's .NET workload list, right? There you go. So you grab that and you do a workload list. It's going to tell you all the workloads that you have. I have taken out a few ones. So right now it's showing me the latest MAUI ones. Sometimes you'll see iOS, you'll see Mac Catalyst. If you are in any doubt, like, do I have the MAUI workloads installed? Maybe I don't see the templates, then this is a good place to start. You are just going to do, where is it? You can just do a .NET workload install MAUI, right? Sometimes you might have, multiple NuGet packages, so it helps to say, ignore my failed, sources. Otherwise, .NET workload install MAUI, that for sure on Windows or Mac is going to get you the workload bits that you need. Does that answer your question, Ed?
Yep, I think that about does it.
Okay, and again, chat room, we are here for 4 hours. Feel free to, take a coffee break, come back and join us, and hopefully you can keep doing some things we are doing here with us. So let me know if I need to respond to the chat room. Otherwise, I will keep on going. So let's bump up my fonts here a little bit, and we'll dive through what you get. So this is a Hello World .NET MAUI project. Now maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but I wanted to start here just to showcase what some of the differences are, because we are going to look at Xamarin.Forms and we're going to look at some migration stories, so it helps understand what is it that we're trying to move to. This is a boilerplate .NET MAUI solution with just one project in it. Now the First difference that you should see is in my solution, I don't have 5 different projects, one for iOS, one for Android, one for Windows, one for Tizen. It's just all one. So this is what they call the single project. And if you look at the CS proj here, there are a couple of things in here to kind of note. First is the project style is now a Microsoft.NET SDK. So this is what they call an SDK style project. It's a CS proj with that on top, makes things much more simple, easy to read. And you're going to see this one line of code here that says single project true. Now this is going to be important when we look at migration from Xamarin.Forms, because you do not have to make this true if you don't want, right? Because in Xamarin.Forms we have 5 different projects, and when you're trying to migrate over, I would recommend you move to this single project, but you are not forced into it if you don't want it. There are a few more things that they drop in here for you. This use MAUI of true, you absolutely want to make this true, because this is what gives you some of the APIs. So platform level APIs, like I want to write C#, that I want to reach into an iOS camera or an Android camera or a Windows or a Mac. I want those platform level APIs to be all accessible to me. That one flag is going to be the one that opens it up. So if you make that false, a lot of things will be turned off for you. So make sure you have that. Now this implicit usings, again, you're not forced into this. I recommend that you keep it on, because this is what's going to let you write C#11, and you're going to benefit from all of the language features. And then the output type here is an exe, because we are trying to build. And this target frameworks, this is what they call what's called a multi-targeted project. So it's a single project, but it has a list of all the platforms where it can run. And those are just names: .NET 7 Android, .NET 7 iOS, .NET 7 Mac Catalyst. For Windows, it's just a little bit more complicated. You can also do Tizen here. And then it comes down to some of the other property groups. And this is where you get some of the benefits. So down here is a folder here called resources. This resources folder is just a folder. It's not a different project. But all of your app dependencies, all of your NuGet packages, they are just in one place. So even though the dependencies, they will show you the different things for iOS, Android, Mac Catalyst, but you don't have to worry about this. When you add a NuGet package here, it's going to add that NuGet package for every one of those platforms that you need. And at runtime, it's just smart enough. It's just one copy of that NuGet package. It just shows up here differently. But you do have these resources folders, or resources folder, which is essentially all of your shared things. And this, having done a lot of Xamarin.Forms and now having done some MAUI, this is one of the biggest benefits, right? So all of your things that you want to be shared are right here. So that includes your app icons, that includes your splash screens, your fonts, your images, any of your styles, be it XAML styles as well as like CSS styles, which we'll talk about. Everything is shared. The images is particularly nice. If you look at some of the splash screens here, they have a thing called the image resizetizer built in. It's kind of a funny name, but that's exactly what it does. You don't see it. It's just an internal, framework feature. So you give it an SVG, and they're going to try to figure out how to render that right SVG for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac in terms of splash screens, in terms of icons. So fonts is a huge benefit here. So in Xamarin.Forms, you would have to install a font for every platform that you support and then manage the changes. Now it's just in one place, so which is really nice. Okay, so this is kind of how it starts out with resources. And then you still do have a platforms folder. Now this is just a folder, not 5 different projects: Android, iOS, Mac, Tizen, Windows. So anything that is specific to each platform still needs to go in here. You will have some things that are specific. For example, info plist, or your permissions, manifest XAML in Android or Windows, or Tizen specific things. And every program will have like a program.cs, which is how it bootstraps the app, and then MAUI comes in. App delegate is the one that does the bootstrapping. And then your permissions, your entitlements, all of your extra things, they still stay at a per platform level, except you are trying to not add as little code as possible for the platform specific things, because you want it to be truly cross-platform. There are some things that will still be there in the platform specific folders, but you are trying to get away from it as much as possible. When you do a build, it looks at all of these target frameworks. If I do a build right now, it's going to try to build for every framework. So one pro tip is when you are developing a new app, you don't want to do a build probably for every platform every single time. So turn these things off. Maybe you're just building first for iOS or first for Android, first for Windows. You can get to those things, but while you are doing your inner dev loop of trying to make some changes, seeing it work, turn off some of the other target frameworks that you don't need. Now this one here is a MAUI app, so everything should be set here. It's giving me a choice of all the different things that I can run this on. I can zoom this a little bit. So I can run this on Mac, all types of iOS simulators. I can run this on Android, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and do a quick run here on a Mac first. That's going to be desktop. If you are wanting to play along, just hopefully file new project MAUI. I'm just trying to give you an explanation of where some of the things fit. So let us know if you have any questions. Okay, so out comes a MAUI desktop application. This is just hello world. You get the nice .NET Bot logo, and you click on this, it's going to count how many times you clicked. Pretty simple. And then the same app, I can simply switch this up to, let's just run this on an iOS simulator here. And let's do a build. One quick question that we get a lot is, what if I'm on Windows? Do I need to have a Mac to build for iOS? And the answer is yes and no. It's complicated because here's the thing. When you're building these app packages, these are all native app packages, absolutely native apps. So they need to be built on each platform natively. So for iOS, it's Xcode. So Apple has a restriction that your apps that go to the stores or that are being enterprise distributed to your users, they need to be built with Xcode that is licensed to the same developer that has the Apple Store account. So no one can get you around that. So that's Apple's developer store, app store, pricing, $99 for a year. But you don't have to have the physical Mac. You just need to have an Xcode. Maybe it's in the cloud. Maybe it's a Mac Mini that you throw onto the desktop, and then you never have to actually see the Mac. As long as Visual Studio can go and talk to your Xcode and do the build, that's all you need. So out comes the same .NET MAUI app now on an iOS, and it'll work on iPad, it'll work on Android. You get the idea. So this is just hello world, and it's nice that I can just without changing a line of code, since the build is smart enough, I can just point it to a certain platform to do a build. So that's really nice. Ed, any questions here so far?
I think we're doing pretty good so far, Sam. Just remind folks in the chat, I am monitoring chat. If you have questions as we go along, it is an interactive workshop. Make sure you drop something in there and we'll try to answer it the best we can.
Yep. So while the app did run, I forgot to show you a few more things. So first up is MAUIprogram.cs. This is a departure from what we had in Xamarin.Forms. This one is now using the .NET generic build host. So now you have the create builder, exactly the way Ed does things for Blazor. We are just tapping into the .NET build host, and we can plug in any of our dependencies. You can set up all of your fonts and anything else that system-wide you have or app-wide you have dependencies on. You can just do it all right here. So dependency injection is now baked in. This was actually a little bit of an internal battle because while the benefits are obvious, you pay a little bit of a price performance-wise as the app is coming up. But again, the benefits far overweigh the little downside that you take a hit on in terms of performance. And then everything starts up here with app XAML, which is a common place to keep your styles, or maybe you want to move your styles off like as they do here. So they have moved the styles and the colors off to XAML, and they put it in the shared repository, so you don't have to keep updating it here. And then your app starts out with the app shell. And in fact, let's go into the appxaml.cs. This one here points you to the app shell. Again, this was also heavily debated. App shell is a way of getting you a common or a nicer starting point, right? So most apps end up being a collection of views that you navigate in between. So you can roll on your own. I often do not use the app shell, so you're not forced into it. You can simply say main page is new main page. Then it starts out right off here, main page.xaml. This is the view that you see. So this is the one that has the .NET bot and the button and the hello world. So that's what you see, except we are not coming to this page directly. We are starting up with app XAML, which is saying, no, go to the shell. And the shell essentially says, okay, I am empty. I don't have anything. I just have a single container, and I'm going to point you to the main page. So if you want to skip the shell, that's totally fine. You can come straight to the main page. But the benefit is with the shell, you get the flyouts. You get the tabs at the bottom. For iOS, you can get tabs at the bottom for Android, and then navigating between view 1 and view 2 and view 3 and coming back. All of that is kind of built in. And it's URL-based navigation. You can carry parameters forward and back, so it just gives you a nice starting point. But it's good that they are not forcing you into this. Some of the flyouts are disabled, but you can add your own flyouts and get going with it. Okay, so Ed, any questions from you on just MAUI Hello World scenario and how things are starting up?
Yeah, under Use MAUI app, it's typed. Is that starting up the app.xaml? Is that what that's for?
I am not following. Where do you see Use MAUI app?
Use MAUI line 11.
Oh, I see. This one here.
It has a type of app.
Yeah.
Is that pointing to the app.xaml? Is that
exactly
off the whole program there? So that's
exactly.
your root entry point to the application.
Main.cs entry point. Oh. And that app.cs, like this app, this is a object that stays in memory while the app is running all through. And then there are some things off the app object that we can tap into. There are some preferences, there are some dictionaries, there are some things you can write into, but this app object stays with you all through. Okay, so this is MAUI Hello World, right? Now let's talk about how you get here if you have something else. So let's switch gears here. Oh, and by the way, before I do that, let me close this, okay? Because this is what Ed and me were talking about, Visual Studio. So if you have not heard, Visual Studio for Mac is being retired. Now, if you are if you are old like me, I mean, it's totally understandable why, if you look at the present area of tooling, but it still is a little bit of a sad time for me, because I have seen the Visual Studio for Mac IDE kind of evolve. Like we started way back 2011-12 timeframe where it was MonoDevelop. This was even prior to Xamarin days. They had an IDE called MonoDevelop, which was a port of .NET outside of Windows, and it was meant for Linux, but they had built up an IDE around it. And then Xamarin came along, and they built up a whole IDE called Xamarin Studio, which is how you build iOS and Android apps on Windows or Mac. And then Microsoft took over Xamarin, and then it became Visual Studio for Mac. So a lot of people may not know this history, but this that you see, Visual Studio 2022 for Mac, essentially is a borrowed code base from a few iterations of IDEs. Now, this is an IDE, but I don't know exactly usage numbers, but it's expensive to maintain engineering-wise. A lot of emphasis nowadays with Blazor and with MAUI or any other type of tooling is with Visual Studio Code. It is cross-platform. It's clearly very lightweight and ultra popular. So it's just was becoming a maintenance headache. So Visual Studio 2022 for Mac is going to be retiring next year, right? So while I'm showing you some of these things, and again, you can keep on using it forever, but it's not going to get any security or platform features. So the same app that I showed you is actually the same exact experience on Visual Studio Code. So here's Visual Studio Code. If I let me show you this first. So .NET MAUI extension for VS Code, and you'll likely end up here. So there's a .NET MAUI extension for Visual Studio Code that lets you do all of the things. It rides on top of the C# dev kit and the C# extension. These are language pack features and cross-platform features using newer compiler systems like Roslyn. And this talks about how you go about getting the extension and building it. Here's Visual Studio Code. If I look into my my extensions here, you'll see that I have a few things. I don't have much. I'm not a heavy VS Code user, but maybe it's time I jump into that. You can see that I have IntelliCode, C# dev kit. I have .NET MAUI. So this is the extension that you need because once you have that, things light up. So if I do a create new project here, if I can zoom in, you can see I can get the same exact, .NET new project types, .NET new MAUI, .NET new MAUI Blazor Hybrid, all of my ASP.NET stuff, all of my Blazor stuff. So it's pretty much the same exact things that you get. And then if you do a .NET MAUI project here, let's do that again. You get asked like, where should I, keep the folder? And then it gives you the exact same project. So if I actually open that same Hello World app that we just looked at, let's go into projects and let's, what was it called? MAUI Hello, this one here. So let's open up that same project that we just looked at, and out comes this little one here. Hold on, let me double tap on this. Yep. Close some of these warnings. Now here's something new. This MAUI Hello, this is the normal kind of explorer that you get with Visual Studio Code. Let me bump up the fonts here a little bit more. So this is fine, but I think they're trying to borrow much more from Visual Studio as the IDE. So you get a solution explorer now. This is the same thing, that it's just a little bit more aware of your files and folders and how things need to be arranged. You can right click on things a little bit more. So you have the exact same app. And then I can run this. I can just run this from here. I can say start without debugging, or I can, let's just, go into a XAML file or a CS file here. Once I'm, I have a .NET MAUI project opened, down here at the bottom, you have this little curly brace, which is sometimes hard to see. It's like this little one that I'm talking about. This one here gives you all the other options. Like this right now, my debug target is Mac, but if I tap on this, I now get all of the same options. Like here's my Mac, here's my Pixel 5, here's my Android, here's my iPad. So all of the same things that you see from Visual Studio, they are also right there. Now,
so Sam, there's a question that is very closely related to what you're talking about right now, so we should hit it while you're on the topic. The question was, on the development loop, is it better to be on the platform for performance and debug reasons? Is there anything better about being, say, on a Mac while you're debugging in macOS app versus like debugging it from remotely from Windows or something?
I see. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're on Windows and if you're building a Windows app and that's what you're debugging, it's going to be a little faster. If you're on a Mac and you're debugging a Mac Catalyst app, it's going to be a little faster. But again, that's just for Windows. The moment you go to iOS or Android, it's about the same. And if your simulators are local, then it's a little bit faster as compared to remote simulators where you're trying to look into something else or a machine that's somewhere else. So yes, it's faster if you can be local, but at the same time, things have come a long way, so it's not, not so bad if you do remote as well.
And a follow-up question here, is it true that you can debug or use the debug version of the application running the Apple gadget directly to a Windows machine?
Oh, Apple gadget. Let me read the question again.
Go ahead. I can see. I can flag that one for you.
Oh, I see. From Gijuro Claridic, if I'm saying it right. Is it true the debug version of the application can be run on any Apple gadget directly connected to the developer's machine? Yes. So I'm hesitating a little bit trying to understand what you are asking here, but essentially, you can have the iOS project. As long as Visual Studio can talk to an Xcode, you can deploy it on any simulator or a regular device like an iPad or an Apple. Okay. Yes, absolutely, you can deploy anywhere as long as you're on Windows, you want to deploy to an iOS device, Visual Studio will need to go talk to an Xcode and do the build, but you don't need to look at a Mac. So essentially, there is a thing here, let me collapse the Q&A panel. There is a thing here called Windows iOS Simulator. So if you're on Windows and if you're building for iOS, then this is likely what you will end up using. So you have some of these remote simulators on your on the Mac side, But then you get, when you hit F5 from Visual Studio on Windows, you essentially get this, which is just a remote version of the iOS simulator. It's just essentially the iOS simulator running inside of a small, shell of a window. And then it just, streams essentially whatever the iOS simulator is showing you on a Mac. The benefit here is, Macs, as much as Ed likes to make fun of me, Macs will not have a touch screen. And I actually don't want them to have a touch screen. There are iPads that I can go touch, but Windows machines do have touch, right? So if you have a MAUI app like this, and you're on Windows, maybe you want to use this simulator because this lets you pinch and zoom. This lets you actually tap on things if you want. So it's your choice.
I think you might have already answered this one, Sam, but it might be worth showing one more time. Can you show how to toggle between different devices from Visual Studio Code?
Yeah. So again, this is all very new. If you have feedback about this, so the .NET MAUI extension for Visual Studio, it's not out ready yet, and in fact there are some things that it has some catching up to do. So if you are editing some XAML, your XAML IntelliSense is not quite at par with what you'll get for Visual Studio for Mac, but then that's just VS Code versus Mac. On Windows, Visual Studio is more than capable, but VS Code is catching up a little bit, so some things are not quite done yet. They're working on it. Maybe they will change this up as well, but down here, notice at the very bottom of my screen, it's aware of which language that I'm using. So language mode is XAML or language mode is C#, and right next to it, I've given them this feedback that this needs to be more prominent to know exactly where you're running. So this is where you switch up your debug target. So I can choose an Android, I can choose an iPad or an iOS device, right? So again, it's just a little bit hidden, doesn't show all the way very prominently where you're running, but you get used to it once you do this a little bit. Visual Studio shows you more of a drop down. VS for Mac, VS Code is just more in front. Okay, so Ed, any more questions or shall we move on?
We got a couple related to migration. They're a little bit off topic. I don't know if you got a migration segment coming up we can answer them in, or if you want to take that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's look at some migration patterns, some more differences, then we'll try to do a little bit of a migrations thing, and maybe we'll get to that when we get there. So let me show you something that is old school, and we'll talk about some of the differences. So here is, hold on, let me comment out some things so I can talk through it. So here is a Xamarin.Forms project, okay? So here, if I right click on this, if I look at the project file, this one looks very different, right? So this is Xamarin.Forms. Maybe this is your production reality right now, because Xamarin.Forms had a good run for 6-7 years, and now it's been, the evolution to .NET MAUI is what it's looking at. So if you are on Xamarin.Forms, you have until May of 2024 to migrate over to .NET MAUI, so which is not a whole lot of time. Now, having said that, come May 2024, your Xamarin apps are not suddenly going to stop working. It's going to be fine, but you're not going to get any of the security benefits. And the bigger thing is your iOS, in some ways Android as well, you might be stuck on a version. So if your users want to move on to iOS 16.1, 16.8, 17, and so on, you may be stuck with an older version of iOS, which is not what you want to do. So if you have a Xamarin app right now, now is the time to start thinking about migrating off. So this is what you get with Xamarin.Forms, which is very different. Now I have a single solution and I have one common library, which is what we used to call the .NET standard library that is shared between iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, whatever it is that you had, target platforms. And then for iOS, then for Android, then for Windows, you get one separate project each. So this is where some of the pain points were. So my packages, like I would have to manage those package versions, NuGet packages, and my dependencies for each project, which was painful, right? And then my fonts and my images had to be catering just to iOS for them to do a build for just iOS, just for Android to do just a build for Android. So these were some of the pain points, and they're trying to fix it all with .NET MAUI. But let's take a look at how things start. So here is the .NET Standard project, which is the shared library. You notice that now it's a .NET Standard 2, which is a thing of the past. There are no more .NET standards. It's just a .NET library now that it can be shared. And this is running on Mono. It has Xamarin.Forms. and so on. So one of the first things that I will point out, and Microsoft is pretty big on this as well in their documentation. If you have a Xamarin.Forms app today, you have had a few versions of this, like from Xamarin.Forms, I think 2 is what I remember earliest days, to 3 to 4 to 4.7 to 4.8, and then 5. So Xamarin.Forms 5.0, the major version, is the last major version that you are going to get updates. Beyond that, there will be just security fixes. So if you are running on Xamarin.Forms, that is 4.7 or 4.8 or even prior, it will serve you best to upgrade your Xamarin.Forms app to 5.0. So just get the NuGet packages. I think there were just a couple of small breaking changes between 4.8 to 5, but you want to be on Xamarin.Forms 5 first before you try to even plot a move to dotnet MAUI. So here's a .NET standard library, and here's how we used to do things in the past. And actually, this hasn't changed a whole lot. If I look at the app XAML.cs, which is how the app starts up, now you do have that same app object that Ed and me talked about, but I don't have the create build host, because this was not the .NET generic host. We used to come straight to the main page here. However, this actually has not changed a whole lot. If you wanted those hooks into your application lifecycle, like when my app starts up, or when my app goes to sleep, or when it comes back into the foreground with the resume, those are still the same lifecycle hooks. Now you get a few more choices, but here it's just a straight up main page. And if I look at the main page here, I'm rendering some XAML here. I get some labels. We'll talk about some different versions of XAML as well. And I get some other types of UI that I want to render. I wanted to show you what it looks like, what it used to look like in Xamarin.Forms, and then what it looks like in .NET MAUI, and then we're going to try to look at some migration patterns. So here I have an entry. So the XAML as a language used, well, it doesn't have a standard per se. So each platform kind of did its own thing with XAML, which leads to these annoying differences between XAML dialects, right? So Xamarin.Forms is more of a mobile first mindset. So they called it entry, which is the same as a text box, is what you would call it in WPF or Silverlight or other XAML stacks or WinUI.
Sam, while you're on the subject of Xamarin.Forms, there's a question in chat about using storyboards. Xamarin iOS using storyboards?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this is a very common way we used to build the front end of your app. So this is Xamarin.Forms. So it's trying to do as much of the abstracted UI as you can. So this piece of XAML that I'm showing you, this is common. So it turns around and renders the native labels and native UI for each platform. But you don't have to do this. This is talking more about Xamarin iOS, in which you still have a shared C# library, but you can build all of the UI for your app natively in Xcode with storyboards or with Swift UI. All of that is welcome, and you can still do all of that, but just know that at that point you are building things that are very native to iOS or very native to Android if you're doing XML. So yes, you can still do that, and at that point you are not doing the abstracted UI, you're doing more of the native UI, and then tapping into a .NET library for all of your shared resources. So this again, if you want this little project, this is up on my GitHub repo, so you can follow along. I just wanted to show you, like, here's an entry field, and normally you get the normal white text box. But what if I wanted to customize it a little bit? This is how we used to do it in Xamarin.Forms. So I would write another entry field, make my own class here. So here's my custom entry, right? So the custom entry essentially extends the entry UI component, which is abstracted, and behind every entry component like this, there used to be a small piece of code called the renderer. So you define an entry in your XAML or in C#. Whenever the build system sees an entry, it turns around and renders the native entry, native text box on iOS or on Android or on Windows or on Mac, right? However, if you wanted to customize that, you could. So here I'm extending the entry and I'm just saying, I want a text box with a green background, because who doesn't want a green text box, right? So with just that one piece of code here, and this is in my common directory, I can run this on iPhone 14. Let's go ahead and run this on iOS. Notice I did that for, all custom entries. So anywhere in my UI, if I'm using a custom entry, it's going to, catch up and do that background color. And I will walk through the steps of this migration in just a little bit. So here comes Xamarin.Forms back on iOS, and here's my regular entry field, which is white, and then here's the one with the green or the light green, right? So here's how you do a customization of a certain UI component that you want to be the same all across. Like you're building the next Facebook, you want your UI to look the same all across. This is how you customize it for every platform. However, if you wanted that customization to be a little bit more, granular, then you have to come down to the platform level. So in my iOS project, now I have another thing called the custom iOS entry. And this is the code that I had turned off for a second. You don't have to, worry about this. I'm just trying to show you an example. This is not something you need to code. I'm just trying to show you what the differences are, and then we'll actually look at some of the migration patterns. So I am showing you a code here where I am creating what's called a custom renderer, right? So every piece of UI that is shared in Xamarin.Forms used to have a thing called the custom renderer, or it has a thing called the renderer, which renders native UI, but you can double down and customize that renderer to do its own thing. So here I'm saying I do this only on iOS. Go ahead and tap into where I rendered this, text box. Notice how it brings in UI kit, which is very much an Apple thing. So now we are in, native iOS land, and we are changing the controls background color to UI color, again, which is coming from UI kit, so Apple's thing, a certain RGB, right? I don't remember exactly what that RGB is, but you are doing this here at an iOS level, and I have an assembly renderer here. So what this line of code is trying to do is, and this is actually what is a little problematic, we are trying to do an assembly scanning to say, is this Xamarin.Forms app running on iOS? If so, forget the regular entry renderer and use this renderer instead. So we are swapping out an assembly, which takes a hit on performance, right? But again, this works just fine. So I'm going to go run that same code again, and you will see the difference.
And Sam, do you have any GitHub repos for the stuff you're working on today?
I think this one should be out, but I will go check in just a second. So this one, same exact app, right? But now, since I'm running this on iOS, I get that purple text box, right? So if I ran this same app, which I actually don't have the Android head, if I ran that same app with the same code on Android, I will still get the green text box because I do have a custom entry that is customized for all. So let me check if I have this one on GitHub, because this one was not something that you would follow along. I just wanted to show you. Let's see if I do. If I don't, I will be happy to put this up as soon as we are done here. Maybe not this example here that I just showed you. So I will put this up on GitHub just so you can see some of this code. But this was just a way of trying to show you that you got some ways to customize things in Xamarin.Forms and bring it over and do it on a per platform basis or do it all across for everything. However, let's do this actually. If all of you want to follow along, let's just do the happiest scenario, and this is what you might be dealing with a more complex scenario like this. But let's just do a brand new project, okay? And this you can certainly follow along. So let's just do a multi-platform app here. I'm going to choose the Xamarin.Forms blank app. Let's just say you are in Xamarin.Forms land and you're trying to migrate. So let's hit continue here. It's going to ask for a few things. Maybe I don't care for Android right now. So let's just say Xamarin.Forms old app. Okay. So let's hit continue, and that's fine. Go ahead and create this project for me. Okay, so I get the classic Xamarin.Forms app as well. And again, hopefully you can do this, with me. Is the screen rendering catching up? Yeah, I think it should be fine. Okay, so I get the Xamarin.Forms app, and again, I have the .NET standard library and I have the iOS project. So let's right-click here, and if I look at the project source file, This is still a .NET standard library, and since it's new, it is giving me Xamarin.Forms 5.0, something like that, right? So this is in case I had a Xamarin.Forms project right now. So I have my standard project and I have my iOS project, and everything maybe is running fine on iOS or on with Xamarin.Forms. Let's go ahead and do a quick build and make sure this is working. I'll do a build for the whole solution. It's doing its thing. Okay, build is good, and now I can go ahead and run this. So this is all still Xamarin.Forms, is what I'm showing you. It is doing a cold reboot, and that's my iPhone 14. Okay, out comes the Hello World Xamarin.Forms app. So if you started a Xamarin.Forms app today, which hopefully you're not starting a new Xamarin.Forms app, you likely have a Xamarin.Forms app that is structured the same way as this one here. You have one .NET standard library, and you have, platform-specific products. So let's just say this is the app that you want to now migrate. You have heard the deadline. It's May 2024. You're now ready to migrate this over. So what are some considerations? There is a lot of help here already. Let me close down some of the things that I don't need. So let's look at Xamarin.Forms to MAUI. So there's a lot of guidance here already, and the developer community is stepping in because this is not something you are doing by yourself. A lot of people are in the same boat. We are all trying to upgrade our apps to .NET MAUI. So there is official documentation, as well as there are lots of articles and videos of people doing this. Now, for some, it might be a very seamless process, but for some, it might be a little bit manual, depending on your app, depending on what you need. Before we go into this, I'm going to show you one more thing here. There's something called the .NET Upgrade Assistant. This is actually a nice little helper to help with your journey to migrate apps. So this has been, again, almost 2 years in the making now. So this comes in two formats. One is a command line tool, which works the exact same way between Windows and macOS. And then there's a Visual Studio extension for that as well, which I'll show you when I go to Windows. But if you look at all of the types here, let me bump it up. This is the .NET Upgrade Assistant and the things that you can use it for. ASP.NET MVC or WebForms, all the way over to running them on .NET Framework, to running them on .NET 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, you name it. Along the way, there are lots of complications about MVC Razor pages or WebForms views, and how do you move that over to maybe ASP.NET MVC or Blazor if you want to get all the way forward. So that's all that Ed and Jeff will cover, I think, next week, right? Ed, because you folks are talking about wide range of ASP.NET migrations.
Yeah, we're basically migrating an ASP.NET .NET Framework 4.8 MVC application to .NET Core 7 with Blazor on the front end.
Very cool. I'm going to get my AC running because I'm starting to sweat a little bit. It's hot in here, unusually hot for this time of the year. Okay. All right, so one more thing you'll see in this .NET Upgrade Assistant is the desktop help. So WinForms and WPF, and we'll look at those things when we look at Windows and desktop side of the story. WinForms, you can run it on .NET Framework forever, or you can move it to .NET 6 or 7 or 8, and a lot more modernization things open up for you when you do that. So that's really nice. Same story with WPF. And I'm old. I still marvel at the fact that I can take a WinForms application, which is something maybe I started in 2002, or a WPF app that maybe I started in 2006, and I can still run them on .NET 6 and .NET 7 and .NET 8, which is remarkable. However, you can also now use it for Xamarin.Forms to .NET MAUI. Now, as with any upgrade assistant, just keep in mind, this is not a magic wand that's going to do everything for you. It's a starting point. It's trying to help you. You don't have to do this if you don't want. In fact, a lot of folks that I talk to, like if you have a very, very complex Xamarin.Forms app, what some folks are doing is, straight away just starting a MAUI app and then just moving things over by hand, right? So a lot of your XAML, all of your C# is, automatically welcome. That's fine. But a lot of the XAML is also reusable. You can just, copy paste over and see what breaks. But a lot of folks are also doing this as a first step. So again, if you tap on this, it's going to tell you all the things that it can migrate, and there are some things that it will actually not try to do for you because it's too complicated. So it's a good starting point, right? So start with that. And I will show you the Visual Studio extension when we go to desktop. But just for the command line tools, if I do a learn more, this is what they're talking about, how you want to get installed. Hold on, where is that up? It talks about all the things it can do, upgrade. So this is talking about the Visual Studio extension. Where's the command line one? Okay, so upgrade with the command line tool here, and you do that. So let's go ahead and do that. So here was my this app here that we just created. So Xamarin.Forms old app, right? So let's go there. So this is sitting in my projects directory here. Xamarin.Forms old app, right? So this is where my Xamarin.Forms app is living. So I have a solution file and I have two projects inside of it. One is my .NET standard library, and then I have an iOS. If you chose Android, you'll also have Android in here. So let's go ahead and run this. And there are multiple ways of doing this. People have shared their experiences. I'm going to show you what I feel is the least path of friction. So let's go ahead and into that project here a little bit. These are all my projects. We're going to go into Xamarin.Forms old app, right? And now we're in here. So if I do a list of all my files, right there is my Xamarin app and my solution file with my .NET Standard library and the iOS project. So if you have not installed this before, I'm going to show you the .NET Upgrade Assistant CLI installation doc. This one here. So this is the Upgrade Assistant, and this is what you do. So .NET tool, it's a global tool. So .NET tool install -G for global Upgrade Assistant, and that's what's going to get you the thing. If you have had it before, now you can also update the tool itself, right? So once you have it, you'll see that Upgrade Assistant light up. So I'm going to go in here and do an upgrade -assistant because that's the way to invoke the tool, and I'm already in the folder. So I'm going to do an upgrade, right? And I can say upgrade this particular solution if you have multiple solutions or multiple projects. I'm going to show you some of the options that it gives you, and this is exactly the same if you are doing command line on Windows or Mac. The Visual Studio extension is a teeny bit different on some of the things it does, which we'll talk about. Okay, so I fire up the Upgrade Assistant, and it's going to ask me a few questions as we go along. It can be very verbose and tell you all the things it did, or it can be kind of silent. So now it's telling me, hey, I see two projects that you have. One is your .NET Standard library, and one is your iOS app. Which one would you like me to upgrade? Now, this is where people differ. I have seen people start with their iOS app or start with their Android app and then move that over to .NET MAUI and then bring the .NET Standard library over. I like doing it the other way, and I think some other people have also commented maybe this is the way you do it. So it's all about getting the most benefit for you. So do whatever is right for you. So I'm going to select the .NET Standard library, which is the shared one first. Now it's asking me, hey, do you want me to do an in-place upgrade, or do you want it to be side by side? Now the in-place upgrade, which we can do for like WPF and so on, but this is essentially, living on the edge. You are on the cliff front. You're saying, do it on the very project that I'm on, and you are signing up for whatever it does to your project. So maybe a little risky for you. I always prefer the side by side, so I can keep shipping and running my Xamarin.Forms app as it is. I just want a side project to make it a MAUI project whenever I am ready to ship. So let's do side by side here. So now it's saying, hey, do you have an existing project that I can just dump all the files in here, or do you want me to create a new project? So go ahead and create a new project. So now we're going to say Xamarin.Forms instead of old app. Now we're going to say Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, right? That's just the name of the project. Now it's asking, hey, what's your runtime? Where do you want me to run this app? Right, and hopefully you are seeing the same prompts if you're doing this with me. Or it might be a little different based on which .NETs you have installed. I have .NET 6, 7, and 8. So it's giving me some choices here. Let's go with .NET 7, which is the present, production ready version of .NET. So .NET 7. So it's saying, hey, I have gathered all the things that I need. You want me to continue? Yes. So go ahead and do that. So it's going to start spinning its wheels, and it's actually fairly fast in what it does, because I gave it the .NET standard project, so it didn't have a lot of things to do, but it still did a few things, which we'll walk through. So it did like 11 steps, 0 failed, 0 skipped, so that's all good. So what did this actually do? So if I go back and look here all the way up to the top, it's trying to transform. It's got these like transformers, and it's trying to do one thing at a time. First, it's going to look at the CS project file and try to do some updates to it, because this was the old school .NET standard library. Now you're moving over to an SDK style project where it's New World and MAUI and modern CS proj. Now this one did not have anything else. You can see those implicit usings. It's setting those to enable. It's setting the single project to true. It's setting the target frameworks to iOS and Android and Windows and Mac. So it's doing all of those things. Now this one did not have anything else, so it's easy. But you can see that it's taking out these things like Xamarin.Forms. So I had a Xamarin.Forms reference package for 5.0 something. That cannot be the case in your MAUI project anymore, because this is not Xamarin.Forms. So it took out that reference, and it also took out Xamarin Essentials, and it replaced it with the MAUI references, so which is exactly what you want. Right now, if you are doing things like the Xamarin.Forms community toolkit, or if you have any third-party dependencies, it's going to try to analyze it, and if it finds the corresponding thing, especially for the .NET MAUI toolkit, it's going to replace it and then tell you that it did. For some, it's just going to flag it to say, hey, I don't know if there's a corresponding one for .NET 6 or 7, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. So that's what this one did. So the reason I start with this is the .NET standard project is kind of lightweight. It's not something that has a lot of platform dependencies, so it's kind of easier to bring in. So let's go back to Visual Studio here, and it's now reloading the solution, because now it realizes that I have added a new solution to this. So we'll let that fly for a second. All right, so now I have my old school Xamarin iOS or Xamarin.Forms .NET Standard library. I have my Xamarin.Forms iOS library, and now I have this new thing called the XF2 MAUI, the Xamarin.Forms to MAUI solution. If I close down these things from the Xamarin world, and if I just look at the MAUI project now, let's right-click and open the project file. Now you see it's different. Now it's MAUI, because now it is an SDK style project. I have the use MAUI is true. I have the target frameworks set to .NET 7 or 8 or 6, iOS, Android, Windows, whatever you need. Single project is set to true. Now, this, again, it might be different for you, but to me, this is one of the biggest benefits of .NET MAUI, being able to have that single project. So I would recommend that you keep that on. However, you'll notice that the output type is not an app. This is essentially a library that they just created just to get you started. And the reason I bring that up is if you have any dependencies in your Xamarin.Forms project, which were Windows specific or iOS or Android specific, it's going to flag it. And anything that is comparable, anything that can be moved over, including namespaces, it will make that transformation much, much easier for you. So I get this, CS proj, which is .NET MAUI, but this is just a library. So what I like doing is I actually cannot run this because this is just a library. So here's what I like doing. I would add another .NET MAUI project here, right? So let's just do a .NET MAUI blank app. And I'm going to match the target framework because I chose .NET 7 before. So .NET 7 it is. Now let's just say Xamarin.Forms, let's just call it MAUI new app. So we have the old app that we are still supporting, but we are spinning up a new app. Okay, so now we have added a new app here. So as compared to the Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, which is a library where I can still keep my older libraries and dependencies, now I have a brand new MAUI app, right? So I can make that my startup project, and now it's a MAUI app. It knows already how to run on Mac and so on. So what I will do is bring some files over. So I have my dependencies. I can actually create a reference to this Xamarin.Forms 2 MAUI project from my actual .NET MAUI project. But notice in my MAUI project, I still have all of the things that I need. MAUI program.cs is wired up exactly to the one I want. And I have this platform specific folder. So what I would do is I would look into my iOS Xamarin project, and anything that was specific to iOS, any splash screens, any entitlements, any info plist, I will just copy them back over into the iOS project, right? So this is what I find the easiest thing to do. So what I will do here is in my app main page.xaml is the way this was called. It's called MAUI new app. So we're going to take that out because we already have the main page that we brought over. So we'll delete that. Sure, delete that. And from that library, I already have a main page here. I'm just going to drop that back in my MAUI app. So now the main page is here. This is the old namespace. So we're going to change that up to, let's just say MAUI new app, right? That was the namespace. And let's look at the code behind here. This is the wrong namespace. So let's just call it the MAUI new app. And that's it. So now I have the same main page that I had in my Xamarin.Forms project. Hopefully this the build picks up. Let's just do a build here. Now it's trying to restore packages because now it's a MAUI app, so it has to go get its dependencies again.
I was going to say there's about 4 questions right now. They're pretty long ones, so I think it'd be best if you just took a quick look, Sam, and see if you've already answered some of them, and if you might want to go into detail on others.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me do this build, and then we'll look at what the questions are. So just to recap, what I am suggesting is if you have a Xamarin.Forms app, it's completely up to you. People have had varied experiences based on what your dependencies are and what your app complexity is. All of your C# should be easy to bring over. So if you have a Xamarin.Forms app like this, I would recommend that you start with the shared project, the .NET Standard library, bring that over, use the upgrade assistant to bring that over, and then the iOS or the Android ones, I mean, those are not something you need a full-on MAUI app because they just go into the folders inside the MAUI app, so it's just a little bit easier. Okay, so it did build, and this is where you are going to likely have some build errors. So take your time, fix one error at a time, and go ahead and do that. So now let's run this since this did build. So I have the same XAML from my Xamarin.Forms app, but now I'm running this on Mac Catalyst, and now you see that. Welcome to Xamarin.Forms, although it's not Xamarin.Forms, now it's all MAUI, but I have some XAML that I can now share between iOS, Android, and Windows and Mac. So that's how I would start my migration journey. If you're on this path, take a look around. People have had vastly different experiences. For some, like I said, it's not too bad of a deal. For some, it's a little bit more complicated. It all comes down to your dependencies. And ideally, hold on, I'm getting a call that I don't want to take. Ideally, you are trying to utilize this, single project, because this is the biggest benefit that you get. You do not have to do platform-specific fonts or images. It really is truly shared across all platforms. So that's my just 2 cents on Xamarin.Forms to MAUI. Now let's look at the chat room here. Will there be a recording? Yes, Tony, absolutely. We will. It's going to be a little long here because it's like 4 hours, but we will put this up on YouTube as quickly as we can. More people asking about recordings. Yes, we'll do that. Scott Hoffman is asking a very tricky question. And so this is what I tell Ed, right? You have the web world, which is just a browser. An evergreen browser, you can ship all your apps. The native world is very, very complicated, especially if you're going to the app stores. So Scott Hoffman is asking about app certificates, okay? This again is different based on platforms. If you're on iOS and if you have a Xamarin.Forms app today that is already in the store, yes, you can utilize the same certificate. You will have that certificate file in your Xamarin.Forms project. If you take the iOS project and you upgrade that, it should leave the certificate as is. If you don't, just bring it over, by default, because your app name, your app description, and your app metadata is not changing. You're just switching up the framework from Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, so you can use the same certificate. I think Android may be a little different, but I don't dabble as much into Android as I do with iOS. So that's just my 2 cents. Okay, so Cesar Ferreiro is asking, how efficient is it to use the new approach in MAUI in terms of devices like printers? My company has native applications in Android and iOS. It's very difficult to work with printers and other external devices when we talk to, yeah, okay. So the question that Cesar is asking is, how native can I get with MAUI? It's a good story for the most part. So let me close down some of this. So let's take you to the .NET MAUI docs. So let's go read the docs here. And if I go into platforms, and let's look at platform integration, right? So right here, this is what used to be called Xamarin Essentials, where you had a collection of 40 or so APIs that were abstracted. You have the same thing in .NET MAUI. It's now called, it used to be called .NET MAUI Essentials, but then it became so essential that it's not there anymore. It's just baked in, so you don't have to think about it. It's just there. So things like launchers and app informations and communication things like contacts, emails, device features like batteries, device displays, flashlight, geolocation, geocoding, media libraries, so camera, media picker, text-to-speech, all types of sharing functionality, storage, so file pickers, file system access, all of that. Everything is done for you, and it's all baked in inside of .NET MAUI. So if I look at, let's just say, device features here, I want to tap into the battery and see how that's working out. And it's cross-platform. I can just write C#. I have to do some permissions sometimes, especially for geolocation. I have to do permissions for Android, permissions for iOS. But I can pretty much write straight up C# and be able to tap into these platform APIs, which is nice. So device information, there's a lot of things like flashlight, geocoding, geolocation, haptic feedback, all of those things. To answer Cesar's question though, this is nice. This gets you probably 90% of the way out there. However, you will always, like the native stacks of iOS and Android, those are vast in terms of their API, canvas size. You will invariably always have things that you do not have, an essential API for, like a .NET MAUI essential API for. So it's maybe something that's very unique to iOS that you just don't have in any other platforms, or maybe it's just something that nobody or Microsoft has not written up yet. And the printer is probably an example like that. Again, it's just a hard thing to do, and especially for iOS or Android, it's more of a desktop-friendly thing for Windows or Mac. So for that, you're looking at what's called the .NET MAUI plugins. Again, this one's pointing you to the community toolkit because they have some plugins that you can actually help write. My good friend Gerald Versluis, he has a whole thing. Hold on for a second. I'm going to go to YouTube for a second, and I'm going to pull up Gerald Versluis. Okay, he's out of Netherlands, and he works with the .NET MAUI team quite a bit. And he makes a lot of really good videos, and he had done something about plugins here that I want to show you. Build your own plugin here. So there's a template for it, and you have to go into native land and write some iOS code, Swift code, or Java code for Android. For printers, you might have something very Windows specific, but you can make it work just for Windows, just for Mac, or you can actually make it a plugin, make it cross-platform, and make it work for everybody. So just a quick shout out to Gerald. Okay.
Real quick, Sam, just going to do a quick housekeeping question. A lot of folks either came in later or have to leave early asking about recordings. So the webinar will be made available as a recording. It takes about a week to get everything processed and posted. So look for it on telerik.com/webinars or our YouTube channel in about a week.
Yep. I see some questions about desktop here. So hold on to those for just a minute while we switch to desktop. But I'm trying to do the mobile ones first. Let's see, a lot of questions here. Did you see any that you wanted to answer? Frank Russell was asking, what's the VS Code extension that we use? It's called the dotnet MAUI. So VS Code extension for dotnet MAUI. That's the one you need for VS Code. Storyboards, we kind of talked about that. Okay. So Doug Jones was asking, you said we could target a specific framework when building the code. Is this done through IDE or you need to edit the CS project? Okay, so that's a double-ended one. Let's go back in here into Visual Studio for a second. So let's just say I have my MAUI app, right? So right in here, I have my choice of where I want to run this, right? So I can do Mac, I can do iPhone, I can do iPad, or any of the iOS devices, or I can do Pixel. When I do a build like that, it is still building for all the platforms. So which is what I was saying, you should probably turn it off if you don't need. So even though I say, give me a Mac build, it will by default do a build for every platform. So if you don't want that, so go into your CS proj here, project file. So what I would do is when I'm doing just my dev loops here, I'm just going to copy that line, right? And I'm going to comment that out. I will come down here and I will take out anything that I do not want to build, right? So I will just do this. So in this case, I still have those target frameworks that I will turn on later on when I want to test for Android, when I want to test for iOS. But in my dev loop, maybe I'm just doing Windows first or just doing Mac first. So just run with whichever one that you're doing. So even though you have these choices here, in fact, now it takes away all of your choices because it doesn't see the target framework. So you saw that, like with all the target frameworks, my choice of where I deploy, all of them light up, but I can just choose one. So even though you're just doing a build for Mac, by default, if it has all the target frameworks, then it will try to do a build for all of it, which is just a little bit more time consuming. So that's my one hint that, turn it off when you don't need those platforms. Okay, go ahead.
Did you talk about certificates at all, Sam?
Yeah, I did. So those should be reusable unless you are changing up the app name or any of its metadata, because then that's a whole other app in Apple's eyes. Dennis Debug is asking, let's say you're developing from a Windows Visual Studio environment, which is the reality for most of you. Do you gentlemen have hardware GPUs installed to help performance during the dev loop? Yes, and some of it should be stuff that's built in. I can speak about the Mac side, and I'll let Ed speak about the Windows side. So if you're doing any Android emulators, the modern Android emulators will all use hypervisors, and that's just a VM with some additional GPU help so they can spin it up a little faster. iOS Simulator does the same thing with Xcode. Now, when you are on Windows and you're targeting iOS, then you are dependent on that other Mac, and that will still do some, virtualization. But Ed, what's your experience with like Android on Windows?
So in the Hyper-V settings, I believe this is in the Android SDK settings as well. There's a little checkbox that I believe is on by default these days that says use GPU acceleration. So basically, it will emulate the Android hardware graphics processing, so it's not bogging down your CPU. So the emulators, they work pretty snappy on Windows once you boot them up the first time. It's always that first cold boot that gets you, but once they're up and running, they're nice and fast.
Yeah, and then things have come a long way. I've used like Genymotion, so choose your Android simulator that's working best for you. Once you get up that from that cold boot, it's not so bad nowadays. Okay, maybe let's do one more question, then we can switch to some desktop things here. Okay, so John is asking, we are trying to migrate a Xamarin.Forms app that was primarily on Android, like an admin type app, like a kiosk style app, okay, which we relied a lot on platform specific interactions. Are there any resources that are specific to this type of scenario which will help us migrate this style of application? Okay, so What John has is, I'm guessing, still a Xamarin.Forms app, but it's it's heavily focused on Android, and he has a lot of Android-specific platform things. So what I would do, John, and again, your experience is going to be different. So you will have an Android app here, and it's the Android app that I can try moving it first to MAUI. So it's immediately going to take out all of your Xamarin.Forms references, and it's going to swap out all of the Xamarin Essential namespaces with the corresponding things in MAUI. And again, you don't need those namespaces. Some of it is just built in. So at this point, if we look at what Xamarin Essentials was, let's just look at this up. So hopefully you're using some of the Xamarin Essentials to reach out for those Android libraries. So if you look at what Xamarin Essentials did, probably 35 or so APIs. So accelerometer, app actions, barometer, battery, clipboard, all the way down to device vibrations and text-to-speech, and all of those. All of this that you had in Xamarin.Forms, they are all available to you in .NET MAUI, right? That's just done. And in fact, .NET MAUI does a few more APIs that were not there in Xamarin.Forms. So if you're using Xamarin Essentials, moving them over to MAUI should not be a problem. If you are, however, using Android libraries where you are doing some very specific Android plugins, which are not done for any other platform, you can bring all of that over, right? So that's just native land. So go into your MAUI app, and in your Android project, instead of just having permissions here, drop your device-specific libraries that you do stuff with Android. And then on your .NET MAUI side, you can always do specific things. So I can go in here. I can say I always have things like I can do hash if Android, or I can say if iOS, or I always have those on platform idioms to say on this platform do go use this library on and so on. So I'll show you more examples of this, but you can always do platform specific things in .NET MAUI. So if you have an Android specific library that you just want to bring along, go ahead and drop that in the Android specific folder.
And Sam, do you have any quick comparisons between React Native and MAUI?
Oh boy. Oh, that's opening up a can of worms.
Is there like a TLDR version of like how do I choose?
Yeah, okay, so let me take you into the React Native world for a second. Now this is a completely different conversation, but just to kind of talk about this. So React Native is very suitable if you are doing any React development for web apps, right? So JavaScript and SPA apps is what you're writing. Now you have a need and a desire to bring it over to native mobile apps. So React Native is your choice, and it runs on desktop, runs on iOS or Android, which is great. Now React Native does things in a very React Native way. So it is JSX, it's writing HTML within your JavaScript, and they have a very similar concept of what we do for renderers or handlers in .NET MAUI. So they will turn around and render native UI. Everything is a widget, and they render native UI for iOS or Android. Now for you to bootstrap this app, they use a separate bundling mechanism. It's called Metro. And your dev loop is very, very quick because you're just touching a component, which we also have in .NET MAUI. I can do hot reload on iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. So in terms of performance, I don't think there's a difference, honestly. It all comes down to, are you happy with the React code base? Do you want to keep on doing React and HTML and JSX and CSS? Or are you wanting to do .NET? So that's your split. If you already have a React application, you don't need to do React Native, because like React, we can also bring in React inside of .NET MAUI, which I'll show you when we talk about the website of things. But it's performance-wise, it's not doing much. I think React Native and .NET MAUI are actually very similar performance-wise because they're doing very, very similar things. Flutter is a different story because Flutter is more about painting pixels. So I think Flutter is a little slower sometimes, but again, the app end users are not going to notice this. The dev loop of you, making a change and seeing it work, that's about the same in Flutter and React, and as well as in .NET MAUI. So, choose your poison. Okay.
A little quick note on the React Native stuff too. I was talking to a React developer just the other day and asked them a little bit about React Native. And the React Native and React aren't as similar as you might expect either. So your like UI code is going to completely need to be rewritten. So from some React developers' perspective, like React Native is not truly like React. It's similar, but so different. Like it's a total different mindset.
Similar ideas, because I mean they cannot just take your React code for web apps and just turn around and render native UI. They have to have those widgets which are written in a certain way. I mean they're similar, but you cannot just expect to take your web UI and just make it a React Native app out of the gate. You have to rewrite that UI to make it a true native app. However, you can bring React into desktop and into mobile if you want, with some modern web views, which we'll talk about. But that's just my 2 cents. Okay, I know there are lots of questions and we can keep diving into more. Let me move a little forward and show you some more things with desktop, and then we can actually try some more things as we go along that maybe you can follow along. So let's talk more about the desktop side here for a second. I'm going to close down some things that I don't need. Yeah, let's close all of this down. So we talked about .NET MAUI, we talked about Xamarin.Forms, but what about desktop, and how does Blazor work on desktop like that? So let's go ahead and bring in Blazor here a little bit. I'm in Ed's territory here, but Blazor is obviously very popular if you are a .NET web developer, because this is modern and it's a beautiful web framework for doing C# front and back. So you can do server-side with a lot more server-side rendering, with a little SignalR bridge, maintaining a shadow DOM on the client side, or you can go completely client-side with WebAssembly. So this obviously is exciting for .NET devs, because now you can do C# and .NET front and back. So this is what, 4.5 years in the making. Blazor that was production ready, so it's mature, it's grown a lot, and this is for all things web apps, right? This is how you build modern web apps with .NET. However, you can bring some of this goodness over to desktop apps as well. So if I go look at .NET MAUI one more time, and this is maybe perhaps where we can all step in and improve the docs a little bit. I don't think this is they make as big of a deal as it should be, probably, because this is .NET MAUI. If I go read the docs, and you kind of need to know where to look to find this. Let's go into user interface here, and I'm going to look at where is it? Controls, views, because everything in .NET MAUI land is a view. Presenting data, BlazorWebView. So keep in mind there are a couple of things here. First up, there is a web view. Xamarin.Forms also had a web view. This is nothing different. This is just saying I just am able to render a modern web browser. This is packaged in, and I will be able to render local HTML or local CSS in that web view. Or if you want to point it to a remote URL, it can do that as well. So that web view really hasn't changed between Xamarin.Forms and MAUI. So if you had a web application that you wanted to embed inside Xamarin.Forms, this is what you likely used, and that's fine. That's not changed. However, there is now a newer thing called the BlazorWebView. Now, this one is still a web view, but it's really smart in how it does a couple of things. And they talk about this a little bit, but I think we can do a better job of explaining the benefits of this a little bit. So this is a web view, but it's a smart web view. So it's smart because it knows how to abstract itself from the platform. So when you have this in a .NET MAUI app, it tries to realize what platform are you running on. So if you run this on Android, you get a web view that is Chromium. If you run this on Windows, you get a web view that is Windows, which is Edge and WebView 2. If you run this on iOS, you get the WebKit one. If you run this on Mac, you get what's called the WK WebView. So it's giving you a different web view for each platform. All of this is seamless to the developer. You don't need to worry about it. And also this one is smart enough to, I mean, it is called the Blazor WebView. It doesn't actually have much to do with Blazor. If you can do completely your own thing with React or Angular inside of this, but it is smart enough to load up the Blazor component model and the Blazor routing engine and the layouts. So it's getting ready to render a Blazor app inside of a MAUI app. So let me show you that in just a second here. So if I did, let's go back here. If I did a file, new project, you can do this, with us here. If I do a file, new project, and in my multi-platform app, instead of choosing .NET MAUI, now we choose .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid. This is what they call Blazor Hybrid, which is essentially Blazor brought inside of .NET MAUI with that BlazorWebView. So that's the one that I'm using. So Hello World project, nothing is different about it. So however, some things are, which we'll talk about. So first thing is you get a .NET MAUI project. If I look at the MAUI program.cs, I still have the generic build host, but now I have this extra line of code that says builder.services. Here's my dependency, bring in that MAUI Blazor WebView. That's that one line of code that I need to bring in that WebView. I still have, my app XAML, and this one here essentially points to, your main page in this case. So you don't have to use the shell. You can bring in the shell if you wanted to. And then we go to main page.xaml. So for folks like Ed, or folks, anybody who hates XAML, this is all the XAML you ever have to see, because all it's doing here is giving you a container. This one here is a content page. Everything in XAML is, a content page or a tabbed page or a master detail page. So it's just giving you a placeholder, and then it's giving you a Blazor WebView. So everything in this UI is all a Blazor WebView. So there is no native UI components whatsoever. We are letting the Blazor WebView drive the whole thing. And how it's driving it is because I have a www.root folder here, just like my web apps. Inside of it, I have my CSS, I have my static resources, I have my favicons, and I have my index.html. This index.html is essentially just a placeholder. It brings in a couple of CSS libraries. It brings in some JavaScript if you want. This JavaScript, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is a very smart piece of JavaScript. Again, Ed doesn't like to write JavaScript, and you don't have to, but this is giving you the JS interop bridge if you wanted to. But beyond that, this div tag is the whole app being rendered. This is your entire Blazor application being rendered inside of the div tag. You never have to see this anymore once you have this set up. And then, by default, it points to the first component, which is main. So we started with main.razor. This is essentially just a router, and it's just saying, hey, go to main layout. That's where you're going to get the layout of the page, and then off you go. The main layout sits here in the shared repository, and that has a nav menu. It has a survey prompt. So everything is a component. And then you have your pages directory, which is your index.razor. These are your Blazor views that you're just dropping inside of your .NET MAUI app and making it work. Right? So let's go ahead and run this first, actually on Android, because I want to show you a few things. You'll notice that I have an if debug statement here. These are the compiler checks, right? So I can say, if I'm running this in debug mode, go ahead and give me some more things. Give me some logging and give me this thing called the developer tools. So this is essentially what every web developer will use, your developer tools in Chrome or Edge or Safari, or whatever it is that you want. So let's go ahead and run this on Android. Let's just start this with a debug mode. So hopefully you have done a file, new project, and you have arrived at a Blazor hybrid thing. You can pause and just let me show you around here a little bit, or you can play with this yourself. So it's cold starting my Android emulator. For some of you folks who are asking how is it, it's not bad. This is a Pixel 5. It comes up fairly quickly. Now this is running in debug mode, so it has to load up all the all the symbols and all the things for you to debug. So it takes a little bit longer. If you're not doing it in debug mode, it's a little quicker as well. So it's still building here. So this is the Blazor hybrid project. Nothing new we have added, just file new project, and we're trying to run this on Android. And Ed, I'm actually going to use a small piece of code that you sent my way the other day, because I thought it was smart the way it was done. I'll show you what that means for iOS or Mac.
And while you're talking about this stuff, Sam, and while we wait for this to build, there's a good question here about can I use features from the platform APIs like camera, geolocation, etc.
From MAUI?
So yeah, with the Blazor hybrid app, you get access to all of the platform APIs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do have a project that's also in my GitHub repo. I can show you that. So you can do some very, very native things with Blazor. which is quite a fun thing to pull off from web technologies. So yeah, give me a minute, or not a minute, but 10-15 minutes, and we'll switch to that native functionality with Blazor. So it's deploying to a device. This is in debug mode, so it's taking a little bit of time from a cold start, but it's an Android emulator with Pixel 5. Okay, out comes my .NET MAUI project, and this will be like a Blazor Hello World type thing. It automatically recognizes that you are on a smaller form factor like iOS or Android, gives you a hamburger menu here. You have the counter, you have everything that works. So this is MAUI app running on Android. But because we are in debug mode, just to kind of prove the point, what that WebView does is I can go to Chrome and I can do Chrome, I always forget what it's called. Oh, I actually have it here. So Chrome inspect devices. So I'm going to bring up the URL here. So Chrome, double whack inspect / devices. This is Chrome's way of letting you look through developer tools on any running app. And since I already have it running here, you will notice that it knows right up here, that's my MAUI Blazor Hello, right? So it already knows there's a Chromium web view inside of my app, so it knows that I can be able to debug this because this is Android. It's a little bit more of the Wild West and open. So I can hit inspect here, and I get this new window with the dev tools.
So nice.
That is so nice. This is, think about this for a second. This is a native app, and you're able to look through all of the code here, and I can just, point and click, and I can see where I'm pointing. Also the nice thing here is I can tap on here, and it's a full-on app. So I can go back to home, and you will see that the emulator goes back to home as well. So it's kind of replicating exactly what the emulator will do, which is, really nice. So here's my Blazor UI here. So let's go into the div here. Here's my page, here's my sidebar, here's my main, here's my article, the div tags, here's my hello world, and I can change this to whatever I want. Hello ed, right? And I hit enter, and it shows up right up here, right? So this is DevTools. You can muck all you want with your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can see the simulator also caught up to hello ed, right? And you can see your CSS, you can see your JavaScript here, manipulate this all you want. This is just DevTools for your native Android apps or iOS apps. So this is nice, really nice, and I can do this all day long in Chrome. However, let's do this. Let's change this up a little bit here. Or is that me or you? Maybe it's me. So let's do the same app, and let's move this up to iOS or Mac in this case. I'm going to change this up to, let's just go to a Mac here. Now, this is one line of code that Ed sent me. You have multiple ways of doing this, but yeah, my emulator crashed. That's fine, because I actually made it close. So here is my main page.xaml. And again, you have multiple ways of doing this. Here is a Mac Catalyst way, and this is an Apple thing. So for anytime you have the WebView, which is exactly what we are rendering, you see that WebView, that is the web view that's rendered for when your .NET MAUI app is running on a Mac Catalyst. If you are doing this on iOS, then you're going to get the WebKit. You're going to get the WebView 2 if you're on Windows. So this is an Apple iOS 16.4 onwards restriction for any Safari type web views that are embedded. Essentially, you need to have an info plist permissions thing to make that Safari web view inspectable. So it's just a setting that says inspectable needs to be true. So with just that, and I'm doing this just for Mac Catalyst here, let's go ahead and run this on a Mac Catalyst build now. So you can do this here, or you can also do an info plist setting on iOS, and it'll do the same thing for you. So here's the same app. Now it's Blazor MAUI hybrid app running on desktop. So it has more real estate. It doesn't need to do the hamburger menu. It's smart enough, responsive enough to do that. I still have my counter. I have my fetch data. Everything works the way it is, but this is a Mac application now. So now I can go into, let's bring up Safari. And if you enable, in your debug, in your Safari options, if you enable the develop menu to show up, here I have my iPad. You see that? And I also have this, weird number. Essentially, it's just pointing to a local application here. And there is my Maui Blazor hello world 0000, right? So that is the same web view that is driving my app. So let's go back in here in my app tag div, not the sidebar, I'll go into the main, that article. There's hello world again, and let's change that back up to Ed because Ed's famous. Hit that, and now we come back to our Mac Catalyst app. Now it says hello Ed, right? So you see what I'm doing here. I'm just changing up HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on the fly because I have a modern web view. Everything here is a web view. There is nothing native about this, but this is a good strategy if you have any Blazor developers in-house, or somebody's already making a Blazor application, and you can bring that over to native land to desktop very easily. Now, this is nothing new though. I will say this because it gets a bad rap sometimes. So let me also talk about this one here, Electron.js. This is nothing new. The desire to have web applications be welcome on desktop, we have been doing this for like 10 plus years now. Electron is battle tested. Electron is what runs your Slack, your Figma, up until a while, even like your Teams was an Electron app. So this clearly works. It's just you need to know what they're doing because there are two things that are different. So Electron will ship with Node.js because that's the bootstrapping. That's what runs your app. And it ships with Chromium engine, like the browser engine, the browser component. So you have like a consistent canvas to render your HTML, CSS on. So by default, a Hello World Electron app is going to be heavier or a little bit bigger in app size than a dotnet MAUI app because MAUI takes a completely different approach. It trusts the user to have a modern greenfield browser, and that's the browser that's borrowing, we are getting the WebView from. So a little different, but Electron, if you just want to see Blazor or React or Angular work on desktop, Electron is still a good option, but I think dotnet MAUI does it better with the WebView. And there are some real benefits to that. So that's just one quick look at Blazor running inside. So the way it's doing it is, like I said, main page, you only have a BlazorWebView. Here's my main Razor, which is just the router, and then I get down to my index pages, which is all of my Blazor views, and everything works the way it is. One thing to note here is if you look at the CS proj, there's one key difference here. As compared to a dotnet MAUI app, which the project type is an SDK, Microsoft .NET SDK, here you have a .razor. That one word in there tells the compiler that, hey, I need to be ready to render Razor components. I might not, but I might come back. So just be ready to render Razor. And that one line of code is actually important if you want to bring in some Blazor dependencies, which we'll talk about to kind of help out your life. So how can we help a little bit? So if you look at, let's close down some of this. Ed and me are obviously biased here because we work for Progress Software and we make things that make you a little bit more productive. This is all of Telerik UI for all of your .NET development. So for mobile development, you have been able to do Xamarin.Forms, and now we have Telerik UI for .NET MAUI. So these are all absolutely native UI for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. And for the first time, you have UI from us that works seamlessly between mobile and desktop. It's not a light statement to make because think about a data grid, think about a chart, and we want that experience to be unique to mobile and desktop. So touch versus keyboard and mouse. So we are very careful in how we render this. So all of this is native. However, if you look at the web side of the story, you can do all the things ASP.NET or JavaScript. But let's look at Blazor here. This is Ed's world, and this is Blazor UI for all of your modern web applications, be it server-side, be it WebAssembly. We are up to what, like 120 plus UI components here for Blazor, Ed, if not more.
Yes.
So this is rich, and it is like 4+ years of engineering. So all of this UI is for web apps, but we are here to tell you that all of this UI also works on dotnet MAUI, which is phenomenal. Now you can bring in all of your web goodness, your custom built Blazor components or Telerik components, and just render them just fine on desktop as well as on mobile. Electron does not work on mobile, so MAUI is your way to bring web to mobile in a very nice way. Okay, so I will show you much more of this, but let's switch to Windows for just a second, because I feel like we have been just spending all our time on a Mac, which is not fair. All right, Ed, any questions while my lights flicker, because I'm about to bring up my VM here.
There's been a couple questions about differences between Blazor Hybrid and MAUI. Like, are there any performance trade-offs between the two, in your opinion, Sam? Is there like any other concerns, pros, cons of using the two, choosing between them?
So to me, it comes down to where you want to be. Do you want to be in .NET, C# and XAML world to write native apps with .NET MAUI? Then straight up .NET MAUI is your solution. If you are leaning towards reusing some web code and Blazor is something you're comfortable with, then Blazor Hybrid is your story. In terms of performance, they're both the same, right? So Blazor Hybrid will run exactly on top of the same bootstrapped .NET MAUI app. You have access to the same platform APIs, which will, I remember we'll need to get back to that. But in terms of the UI, that's where it's different. So .NET MAUI is straight up native, while Blazor Hybrid is straight up web, and you're rendering things inside of a web view. This is a modern web view, so it will render things like a snap, and Blazor is actually not running anywhere else. It's not on a server, it's not on WebAssembly, it's literally running on the same metal as your .NET MAUI apps are running. So performance is exactly the same. Just keep in mind though, it's HTML, CSS versus .NET XAML. And the web view, even though if it's a web view, it's not sandboxed in like other web views like a PWA or Electron might be. This is truly a native app, so you can tap into all of the platform things. So performance-wise, there is no difference. Now, having said that, we are developers. We can always shoot ourselves in the foot and get into trouble. So that web view that I showed you, there is no stopping you from putting a dozen web views on a single view. If you do that, just understand that each one of them is a Chrome or a Edge or something like a Safari process that has to kick in to render that web view. So if you do a dozen web views on a single page, yeah, your performance is going to take a hit. But if you don't, if you just do one, then you're fine. Your entire web app is going to be rendered and it's going to be running locally, so you're fine. Okay, I am on Windows, my beautiful Windows box. I do actually have a Windows tower that's under my desk. Sometimes I remote into it, but when I'm on the road, the VM is hard to beat. So let's look at Microsoft Visual Studio, and things are too big for me. Maybe I can minimize a little bit. So let's start with some things here, because we have not looked at the Windows story at all. Let's start with .NET MAUI first and see where things were. So let's, oh, I already was doing this code, so we can actually jump through this a little bit here. So this is a .NET MAUI project, so I can do File, New, and I can do Project. If you want to follow along, then if you have those workloads, you're going to see the .NET MAUI or the .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid. These are the two templates that you light up, and you do .NET MAUI and you hit Next and Close. This is the app that you get. This is a Hello World .NET MAUI project, exactly the same app that we saw in Visual Studio for Mac. I have my platform. These are all folders, Android, iOS, Mac, Catalyst, Tizen, and Windows. I have my shared resources. Everything is exactly the same. I have MAUI program.cs, which gives me the bootstrapping. I'm going to bump up my fonts here a little bit more so you can all read. So exactly the same code. Now, here's the nice thing here. Let me go into main page.xaml here. This is the XAML that gives me the UI part of it. This is a straight up .NET MAUI app, right? So let's go ahead and hit this in a debug mode. And I'm going to run this locally on my Windows machine. So again, if you're following along, just File, New Project, .NET MAUI app. That's what I'm showing you on Windows here. So now you can see that on the background, it did load some diagnostic tools and other things that it needs, but this is the same .NET MAUI app that we saw on iOS, Mac, or Android. Now it's running on Windows. I do get a few extra things. Since I'm on Windows, I'm on the best version of Visual Studio, so I get some additional things, like I can do a live visual tree. I can change up some UI. I can see how that UI affects myself, and I can have some extra things, like I can choose elements. And where's the one that I like showing off? Okay, so binding failures. This is a fun little thing, because in XAML we're often doing a binding. So I have a data grid, or I have a list view, and I'm binding it to a collection of items or objects. If I'm binding something wrong, like if I have a label and I'm binding it to a property that just doesn't exist, it's going to bark at me and it's going to say, hey, I don't have a corresponding property to bind. So you get some extra features, but otherwise this is the same. So now you will notice that at the very bottom here, it says XAML hot reload is connected. So it knows that I'm running this app and everything is hot. It's hot reload, hot restart, everything is hot. So Ed's popular here today. So we're going to change this hello world to hello Ed. And I don't even need to save my app here. It's already picked up, right? So you see how quick this is. So when I'm developing at home, I put the simulator or the app on a side monitor. I use an iPad, and that's where it stays. I don't have to touch it, and I can just keep hot reloading this as far as I can. And it's not just the XAML part of it here. So when I click on this button here, it's going to fire off this main page.xaml CS here. Let me close a few things so we can see more of the code. Too many things are open. Go away, go away, go away, go away, go away. There we go. So now you can see that when I click on that counter, I have a counter integer here that I'm incrementing by 10. So I hit this once, it goes like click 10 times. I hit this again 20 times. So I've clearly changed this code before. So that's because it's saying doing a count of count plus 10. Let's just change it back to what the usual thing is, which is count plus plus, which is incrementing by 1. So I save this, and now this is a C# code that I'm changing. It's a small component of my page here. So here in Visual Studio for Windows, you do not have this in VS for Mac. On VS Code, you can do similar things with file watchers, but in VS for Windows, I can just hit this fire icon. This is C# hot reload. It's saying, hey, I applied those code changes, and now my app is still running. Now when I hit this, it's going to increment by 1, like you see 31, 32. So it's pretty good inner dev loop between editing XAML and editing C#. I will say this though, know where things are going to fall off, right? So as long as you're on the same page, you can edit all the XAML that you want. But if you change up some of the core pieces, like if I look at MAUI program.cs here, if I have additional dependencies that I'm listing out here, if I'm swapping my IOC container, if I'm changing up which views that I'm loading up, then the hot reload is just going to fall apart, right? And you kind of expect that. So if you're on the same page, if you're just changing up some common C#, you can do this all day long, and it's it's actually fairly good trying to keep up with it. So that's just the hello world experience for .NET MAUI. I'm going to change this back to world because Ed has had enough hellos for the day, I think. Let's look at a different side of the story here. First up is let's create a new app here. And again, if you folks want to follow along, I just want to show you what this looks like. So let's go to a new project here. And I'm going to choose, if I do a search on WPF here, now we're talking desktop, WinForms and WPF. If I do a search on WPF, and based on what you have installed, you're going to see a whole bunch of things. One is the WPF app. You notice the C# and Windows, or you can do a WPF app doing Visual Basic. That's still an option, for all three of you. No, I'm just joking. It's fine. But you can do a WPF library and so on, or you come down all the way down here, and now it says it's a WPF app, but it says .NET Framework, right? So here's the difference. This template here, WPF app, gives you a WPF app that's running on .NET Framework 4.8 or whatever it is. But if you choose this this WPF app, this is going to give you a modern WPF app running on .NET 6 or 7 or 8, right? So that's the difference. Let's start with old school WPF, right? So you've had this WPF app forever. It's running on .NET Framework. So let's go ahead and create this. This is my WPF old app, right? And that's fine, see demos. Now notice how it's saying, hey, where do you want me to run this? Looks like I have a few of these .NET frameworks installed. 4.7, 4.8. Let's just go with the latest one, 4.8.1, and create. So what I'm doing here is creating a classic old school WPF app that's running on .NET Framework. And this may be the reality for a lot of you. If you are maintaining a quote unquote legacy app. I don't like the word legacy because it sounds like it's old, but it's not. It's running your business. So it's very modern. So I get this WPF app, right? And everything about this is a .NET Framework app. I get my Windows YAML and my Windows YAML.cs. This is exactly how a WPF app will start out. If I right click here, if I look at the project properties here, you will see that it's running on .NET Framework 4.8. It's a Windows application. I got my build pipelines, I got trace, I got everything, debug, everything is set up exactly what a .NET WPF app will be. So let's go ahead and run this really quickly, just to make sure it builds.
And Sam, while you're on the topic of WPF, we've got a question. Is there a seamless conversion for Telerik WPF controls to MAUI? They've extended some of their WPF controls and wondering how easy it would be to convert them.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of folks are in that same boat. I'm going to pull up a couple of links and we can talk through this, but give me a second to get back to you on this. I'm going to pull up a few links here so we can talk through this together. But just let's come back to the question in just a second. I will talk about what it is like for Telerik UI if you're using WPF versus MAUI and so on. Okay, so I get this empty page because there's literally nothing in it, but this is a WPF app running on .NET Framework. Now, here's the nice thing about WPF. I can right-click here. Let me first show you the extensions. If I go into my managing my extensions here, I have a Visual Studio Marketplace with all of my extensions, and I can search for this. You can see I've done this before, .NET Upgrade Assistant. There it is, right? So this is an extension. This is going to be exactly a wrapper over the .NET Upgrade Assistant that we saw over a command line. Exactly the same tool with some differences. So this is just an extension that makes it nicer. It's more GUI friendly. It's all command line and it works nicely. So I can come into my WPF app here and I can right click. Notice I can do a few additional things here. So let's just do, what is this thing called? The .NET Analyzer. This is one, hold on. So WPF .NET Upgrade Assistant. And this talks about the .NET upgrade side of things here. Okay, WPF here. How to upgrade WPF desktop app to .NET 7 is what they talk about here, which is exactly what we are about to do. So, what I'm trying to do is before you plan a migration from WPF or WinForms, you should do a analyze, right? So the .NET NuGet analyzers, remind me what it's exactly called, but it can actually look through and tell you like these are some NuGet packages that do not have a corresponding thing. So it all comes down to your dependencies, right? But if I, let's just say I'm not using any Windows specific things or NuGet packages that can move forward, I can do an upgrade, right? And out comes this little UI, which is pretty much the same as the command line thing. It's saying, hey, what do you want me to do? Upgrade projects to newer .NET, because that's what this is about. Now it's asking me, do you want to do an in place or a side by side? So again, I prefer the side by side because it doesn't touch your, excuse me, default WPF or Xamarin.Forms project. Just gives you a different project and you can keep working on the older one. But this one's just a hello world WPF app, so I don't care. I'll do it in place, live on the bleeding edge a little bit. Now I get the same prompt. Where do you want me to run this on? Now this is a WPF. This is not a MAUI app, right? So this is saying, hey, right now I run on .NET Framework, right? 4.8.1. And if you, let's just do a right click on this. And how do I get to the project file in here, the CS proj? because I can open up the properties, which is the same thing. But there's a CS project that I can open up that has the old school CS project. We'll see how this changes once we do the upgrade. So let's just do .NET 7 here, standards support, and let's just hit next. And now it's going to tell you, hey, what do you want me to upgrade? So this is where if you're doing this from Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, if you have very Android specific things, you can just uncheck them because you don't need those migrated out. But everything else here is fine. And that's it. I'm just going to go upgrade. And now it's going to sit there and spin for a second. It's fairly quick. It's restoring and it's done. Completed 18 successfully, 6 skipped. Okay. So what you see here is the result of what it did. Let me minimize this here a little bit. And you can actually see the build output for more things. A green solid checkmark means it was successfully able to go in and do that thing. So CS Proj successfully applied all the transformations, blah, 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 and I did it. An empty green one means I kind of did it, but there are things that you should look at. A yellow will mean that you should definitely look at it, like this empty field kind of app config, no applicable transformation. So there was really nothing to migrate. It just gave you that file as it is. And then sometimes for MAUI or Android, you might get like a yellow or a red to say, hey, I don't know how to migrate this whatsoever. You should manually look into this. But again, for a straight up WPF app, this is pretty easy. And this is where Ed and me will tell you it comes down to your dependencies. If you have a NuGet package that you are depending on that only runs on .NET Framework, does not have a corresponding thing on, let's say, .NET 6 or 7 or 8, you will not be able to move forward, clearly, because you have a dependency that you do not have a corresponding thing. And maybe this is a time where you question whether you really need that dependency because it's preventing you from, moving your code base forward, right? So maybe it's a good time to refactor and question whether how much of that dependency do you want to need, do you want to use. So I'm going to close this here. And now if I right click on this, where is my, edit project file right there. I couldn't see that before. So now you have a WPF app, but notice the difference. Now it has changed up the project style to be an SDK style project. Now it says, hey, your target framework is .NET 7 Windows. This is not a MAUI project. This is a WPF project. Output type is a WinXE, and I have some package references right here. So right out of the gate, it just transformed the runtime from .NET Framework to modern .NET, this being .NET 7. I can run this on .NET 8 or .NET 6. And if I go ahead and build this and run this, it's not going to look any different because it's an empty app. But I just wanted to show you that .NET Upgrade Assistant, that extension is there for you to do these in-place updates fairly quickly. Okay, now how should you go about doing this? Because there was a question about Telerik UI, so let's try to answer that. If I look at blogs.telerik.com, okay, so this is where a lot of us, Ed and me, will write a blog post on things that we care about. This is where we put a lot of love and care about topics that matter to you. So my good friend Rossi here has written a couple of articles. So if you do a search on WPF to .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid or WPF to .NET MAUI on our blogs, you'll likely end up on these articles. So in here, she has really used a graphic that I really like. So it's kind of a tree. So let's just say you have a WPF app and you're trying to decide which way do you want to go. Do you want to keep on running WPF? Because what I just did was I ran WPF from .NET Framework, .NET 7. I can stay on WPF, no problems with that. WPF runs with mouse and keyboard on desktop. It runs with touch on like a kiosk type surface. So I can do all things modern with WPF. Or should I go to MAUI? Because that's a big jump. Because compared to Xamarin.Forms to MAUI, that's easy because you're just changing up a few namespaces, some libraries, some XAML, some of the way the app bootstraps. WPF to MAUI, that's a big jump because now you're completely changing up the runtime and the framework. WPF is very Windows specific. Even when WPF is running on .NET 7 or .NET 8, it is very much a Windows desktop technology. .NET MAUI is a cross-platform technology, and you will have to do some work to make a WPF app work as a .NET MAUI app. So this flowchart here essentially tells you what you care about. So do you care about the native look and feel? Then yes, then you absolutely want to do MAUI. Or no, I want the same look everywhere. Do you love XAML? Yes, then I can do MAUI, or I can do Blazor Hybrid if I prefer CSS HTML. So it's just a nice little graphic that shows you between .NET MAUI and Blazor Hybrid. So if you do decide on .NET MAUI, so between WPF and XAML and .NET MAUI XAML, understand there are differences, because MAUI XAML is about the same as WinUI or Xamarin.Forms XAML, which is the 2009 XAML spec. That's just the XAML spec that we adhere to. But WPF and Silverlight, those use the 2006 XAML spec. So there are some annoying differences, okay? And it's not one-to-one, but at the same time, it's not hard. So if I take a WPF app and if I try to move all of the C# code forward, maybe it's not using some of the C# 11 features, but it should move just fine. The XAML is not going to move fine as it is. So my recommendation would be to keep your WPF app and open up a new .NET MAUI app within the same solution, and then move things over one at a time. You do not have a tool that goes WPF to MAUI in one go, because that's just too difficult. But most of the UI part you should be able to reuse. But you need to know where the differences are. For example, if you want to use a text box, that's called a text box in MAUI or in WPF as compared to an entry in .NET MAUI. Things don't have borders like the way we are used to in WPF land. It's more about containers in .NET MAUI, although if you're using some of the Telerik bits, our APIs are about the same. It's height and width in WPF as compared to height request and width request in .NET MAUI. Layouts are different. Layouts are either, you can use like a stack panel in WPF. It's like more of a stack panel, or a vertical stack panel, or a horizontal stack panel. Grid is a grid. Dock panel is a dock layout. Wrap panel is like a Telerik wrap layout. So there are some similarities, but you just need to do this by hand. There is no magic thing. If you're dealing with Windows, again, things are just a window in WPF land. Things are not quite just a window in .NET MAUI land, because now it's talking about iOS or Android as well. But there are corresponding similar things. You can get the window handle and resize. What else? So events it's like either button.click versus button.clicked, so not too difficult. Images and resources. This is probably one of the biggest benefits, because now you can bring in all of those images and styles or fonts from WPF into a .NET MAUI project, put them in that shared folder, the resources folder, and they'll start getting reused between Windows, Mac, iOS, or Android. So a lot of different things. You can do handler customization. So again, check out this article. It kind of talks through what it is. Now, in terms of what the question was, like how do I use this versus that? So let's go ahead and do that. So let's, in fact, we can build this a little bit on our own. So let's look at our UI. If you look at desktop, right? So we have been doing this for 20 plus years now. We started with WinForms. Now we have, WPF, you have UWP, WinUI, and MAUI. We cater to every way you want to build a, Windows desktop application. If you look at our WPF suite, this is 15 years in the making. So it's very mature, right? It's got 150 plus UI components. Every type of visualization, every type of navigation, data management you can think of, we got it. And these are all native UI components for WPF running on Windows. So if you take any of this and you want to transform it into a .NET MAUI app, you have to realize .NET MAUI is 2 years old as compared to 15 years old with WPF. So it's not apples to apples. It's not the same comparison. For most of your hard-hitting things, if you compare the MAUI suite with the WPF, we have been working on this very rapidly. So the suite is growing, but it's not at parity with WPF, right? And again, we have enterprise customers who are building desktop-first apps coming from WPF with .NET MAUI. So if you look at some of the things we have done in the MAUI suite, for example, those are very desktop friendly. Let's look at some of the docs here. I love showing off the grid because that works across everything. If you look at the grid control here, for example, This one here, I love some of the features in here. In particular, I love these things like frozen columns. So I can, freeze some columns here and I can move it around. All of my, sorting, filtering UI, grouping UI, row details, where you have like, so it's like a grid within a grid type situation. Like you have each row of the grid open up and show you another grid or a chart or a graph. So you can do all of it. Just understand that it's not apples to apples because .NET MAUI has not had enough time. So if you're coming from WPF to MAUI, hopefully we give you most of the things we need, but it's a churn. We are trying to build up as many things as we can. And again, you don't have to completely come to MAUI altogether. You can stay in WPF and still benefit from some of the new modernness. So that's my 2 cents. Ed, anything I should answer?
I had one question that we might have differing opinions on. Is there an advantage to waiting for .NET 8 to release before migrating a Xamarin app to MAUI? What's your opinion, Sam?
Oh boy. No, you should start right away. Because .NET 8, to me, it's more, yes, they're adding a lot of features to it, but it's more of a stability release because they are really trying to solidify some of the tooling. MAUI will keep on working the way it is in .NET 8 with a lot more stability. So if you have, a Xamarin.Forms app right now, you can move it to MAUI. Between moving from MAUI from 7 to 8 is just changing literally one line of code from the target framework of .NET 7 iOS to .NET 8 iOS, and you'll be up and running.
So I've had differing experiences than you. So migrating from 6 to 7, I've run into breaking changes and having to regenerate the project. So my recommendation is if you can wait.
Yeah, 6 to 7 was a little bit more involved than 7 to 8 would be in terms of APIs and breaking changes. So yeah, it depends. Now, Ed, if you can try answering 1 or 2 more questions, I got to take a quick break, and I'll be right back in like 30 seconds. Let's dive into more of scenarios of desktop and what this means. I know there are a couple of questions on using Blazor with some very native features. We'll get to that, but let's keep talking more about the WPF and WinForms story here a little bit more, because I think it's interesting what some of those things mean for us. So let's show you another project here. And again, you don't need to follow along, just watch a little bit because you can do this on your own. I'm not showing anything out of ordinary, just trying to prove a point. Because folks were asking about, like, this is the reality for a lot of folks. Like, you have a WPF app that's been running your business and it's running fine. And you are questioning whether should you go into making it a .NET MAUI app. It depends. If you have a need for reaching the Mac desktop, then that's the only thing you can do, because like WinForms and WPF will not work cross-platform. Those are Windows technologies. So if you have to go cross-platform, maybe you don't need mobile right now, maybe you just need desktop, but you need Mac, then yeah, you kind of have to jump onto .NET MAUI. But if that's not your concern, if you want to stick to Windows, then maybe you don't have to give up on WPF altogether. What I want to show you here is another WPF app here. See, I have not made this a .NET MAUI project. This is still WPF, but I'm going to bring in something here. So in my references, you can see that I'm bringing in this NuGet package called Microsoft.web.WebView2.wpf. So look for it in the NuGet repositories. You can find this. So when we talk about the BlazorWebView, so now we're talking about bringing Blazor goodness, but not just inside of a .NET MAUI app. We can bring it to WPF and WinForms as it is, because we know that you're on Windows, so we don't need to use the BlazorWebView. We can benefit from the BlazorWebView even without going to .NET MAUI. So I'm bringing in that WebView2 NuGet package, and with that one NuGet package, I can just drop that WebView2 in my main window.xaml, still very much a XAML app, and I can point to a URL. So let's go run this. Okay, I have not done anything to this WPF app, so it's just running a straight up WPF app. This may be your lowest hanging fruit, kind of a hackish way, but I'm essentially rendering a big web page inside of a WPF app, right? So you can do this all day. Based on the web page, you will get things that are responsive or not. right? So you can do this all day. So you don't need to go to .NET MAUI. You can have access to the WebView too. So when I use a Blazor WebView on Windows, it's actually rendering a WebView too. So here we are completely bypassing MAUI and just saying, give me a WebView too, so I can render some web UI. Now this may not be very, convenient to just render a native or a website within a WPF app. Let me show you something that's a little bit more realistic, and maybe we can build on this a little bit more, bring in some Telerik UI to this. So
as you bring in this new app, Sam, could you elaborate a little bit on like what the next steps would be to get more involved with like the cross-platform aspects when you're migrating things over to Blazor Hybrid here? Like, is this like a stepping stone that you can use to get from WPF to say like a MAUI Blazor app and then fully migrate to allow Android, iOS, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, but that's a separate question, right? That is making it to a .NET MAUI app. So I would love to show you more about how a straight up .NET MAUI app would work, but this is still on WPF land. Okay, so if you folks can just hold on to that for another 10-15 minutes, let's wrap up the WPF story where you are sticking to WPF. You're not making it a MAUI app yet, and then we'll see what it takes to make it a WPF or make it a MAUI app. Right. So that was just a quick look at WPF, but let me also show you this quick thing. I'm just trying to wrap up if you wanted to stay with WinForms and WPF, what would that look like? Hold on, this is a different app. I wanted to show you this one here first. No, that's the WebView, my bad. BlazorWebView, that's the one I wanted to show. Okay, so this is still a WPF app, but notice like what Ed was saying, I have not made this a .NET MAUI app yet, right? So because ROI is something important, you have to think about it. Should I completely give up on my WPF app? If most of your customers are still on Windows, maybe you don't need to make it a .NET MAUI app, right? So as a modernization strategy, you can bring in some bits of modernness into your WPF app, but still keep it a WPF app. You don't need it to be cross-platform yet, so maybe this is kind of a low-hanging fruit. So here is a WPF app. If you look at my dependencies here in my NuGet packages, I still have that one dependency that I brought in, which is my WebView 2 or WebView WPF package. With that, again, I can call this WebView 2 or I can call this BlazorWebView because now it's running on .NET 7. So here is my main window.xaml. Here I am calling it a BlazorWebView. Oops, didn't want to undock that. No, go back in. There. So this is still a WebView 2, but I'm now calling it a BlazorWebView, and I'm pointing it to some dynamic services. If you look at the main window XAML.cs, I am bringing this in as a service, right? So I'm pointing it to the build service provider, so I can grab anything that Blazor brings into the picture here. So here's my main window, and it's pointing to this BlazorWebView instead of pointing to main.layout or main.razor. Now it's pointing to counter, right? So there is a www.root folder here, which is very web thing that we are dropping into WPF, and that can bring in CSS, that can bring in index.html, right? But our goal is to bring in some Blazor. So if you look at the index.html, this is pretty much the standard index.html that one would have if you were doing straight up, Blazor. That's the div tag. So what I'm doing here is exactly what is documented. So if you do a search, let's just say WPF Blazor, right? You're going to land on this page. That's what they're talking about. Build a Windows Presentation Foundation project with Blazor in it. And this is the same steps that we are taking here. So with that, we can now drop in a counter.razor component, which is a straight up Blazor component. And I don't have much more styling or anything else going with it, but I can just run this, right? So it is a web view, but it's now being a little bit more smart. Instead of just pointing it to a URL, I'm saying, hey, I have a counter.razor Blazor component sitting right inside of my WPF app. I don't have much styling to it, but here's the counter working. And that's the same Blazor component that you see working across web or mobile. So you can bring in Blazor straight away inside of a WPF app, right? So These are very much an options. If you wanted to follow along and do some of this on your own, do a search where it says WPF with Blazor, and right in here is also WinForms with Blazor. So that's also an option for you. Let me show you that really quickly here. Let's go in here, close that, and we're going to do Blazor and WinForms. So this, again, just think about this. WinForms is 20-year-old tech, and we are putting Blazor inside of that, making it run on .NET 7. So if I do the edit of the project file, you'll notice that it's running on .NET 7 Windows. My output type is a WinEXE, right? And I have a dependency that I'm bringing in, which is ASP.NET Core WebView. So it's the same WebView, but now it's for WinForms instead of WPF. So with that one, NuGet package, I can have my form1.cs, which is my designer, and I can bring in that BlazorWebView. I can just drop it. You can see that WebView right in there, right? So I can drop that in here, and then that's all I need. I can drop in my counter.razor, and that's my Blazor component, and I can go ahead and fire this up. And this is a WinForms. You see that form1? This is absolutely a WinForms application running on .NET 6 or .NET 7 or .NET 8 with a Blazor component inside of it, right? So when you think about migrations from WPF or WinForms, you don't have to go to .NET MAUI right away, right? Because maybe you have your customers still on Windows, and Windows is where you want to be. You just want to benefit from some modern UI. Bring in Blazor, bring in all these modern things inside of your WPF or WinForms app. You don't have to make a switch to .NET MAUI, because that is not a simple switch. That is not a Xamarin.Forms to MAUI switch. Now you're changing up the framework. So WPF to MAUI or WinForms to MAUI is going to be much more involved, because you are changing up the UI stack, you're changing up the framework that you're running on. So if you want to stick to, or if you can have the option of sticking to WinForms or WPF, you still can bring in some Blazor goodness into those desktop applications. Makes sense?
Sam, just to clarify, we need to upgrade from .NET Framework to some version of modern .NET before. Is it .NET 6 is the minimum before we need to use WebView?
Absolutely. So if I right click here and show you the project file, this one is running on .NET 7. Oh, this got undocked again. So this one's running on .NET 7, but I can do .NET 6 Windows. But this WebView thing is going to start working from .NET 3 forward, right? So all of the modern .NETs, not .NET Framework, not .NET Core, but .NET, I think 5 forward is when it starts working. But 6, 7, and 8 is absolutely when it will work. So if you can afford to just modernize the runtime of your WPF or your WinForms app to a modern .NET, like .NET 6, 7, or 8, then you can do this all day long. Make sense?
Sounds
okay.
Good.
Let's switch to something that was asked a little bit back about Blazor Hybrid, right? So yeah, let's close down Visual Studio here on my Windows box. We'll keep the VM running in case we need to get back to it. But let's switch to some more Visual Studio stuff. Okay, where was it?
And I'm going to jump out for a quick break, Sam.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about a few things here. First is this one here. Let's do the Blazor thing, where it's a .NET MAUI app. You are bringing in some Blazor, but you are not sure how much of the native stuff that you can do. So let's try to answer that. And actually, while Ed is gone, I'm just going to take a quick look at the Q&A panel. And thank you, by the way, for hanging out with us. And hopefully you are able to do some of this. Well, Josh is asking, will this video be available for later view? Yes, we will record this and put this up on YouTube as quickly as we can. Looks like John Oton had a few questions answered. Let's see. WebView 2, yeah, so John, the question was, is the WebView 2 NuGet package available for legacy .NET framework? No, you have to move to a modern .NET. That's the key thing. And again, the .NET upgrade assistant is actually really good. So if I go back here to the .NET Upgrade Assistant here, it is really good at doing some of this, like WinForms or WPF. You want to give it a WinForms app that's running on, .NET Framework and move it to .NET 7 or 8. It's really good at doing that. So use the .NET Upgrade Assistant, move it over to a modern .NET, then you have the WebView available to you right away. Yeah, Florian is saying, I really like to focus on these technologies we all used for such a long time, but they don't have a cross-platform story. Yeah, WPF and WinForms will always be Windows technologies. And if your users can stay on Windows, then you can stay on Windows as well. A couple of questions that are MAUI specific, which we can get back to. Oh, I see. Dennis is asking a good question here. Progress, Telerik has such a large number of controls across different suites. I would love to be able to do a diff to see what exists between Blazor and MAUI. Yeah. The Blazor schedule view. Yeah, that's a good point. So there is, well, the thing is, like, there is no diff because these are, very widely different platforms, Dennis. But I would pull up the two pages side by side, like the MAUI suite and then the Blazor suite, and see what you're missing, because we're catering to different audiences. Blazor is still mostly for web developers, while MAUI is for native developers. There might be some differences. I think the schedule that you talked about, we are actually building a schedule view for .NET MAUI. It's not out yet. It's coming. So if you need that right now, then Blazor UI is maybe something that you bring in, because again, keep in mind, like, our Blazor suite is again 4.5 years in the making. So a lot more engineering has gone into it as compared to the .NET MAUI suite, which is 2.5 years in the making. So it's catching up fast, but you still have some things that you have in Blazor that you don't in MAUI yet. Okay. Oh boy, Ethan. You're looking for an upgrade tool for VB and .NET Framework as well. First up, we can do a Hugs as a service if you're having to support VB. No, I'm just kidding. VB is good. It's just, not as many people do this nowadays. We used to have a thing. Let me see if I can pull this up, or if we support this still. Yeah, where is it? We still do. Look at that. Who was I answering to? Hold on for a second. Let me see. The question came from Ethan Parrish. Okay, so VB to C#, right? So we actually have a tool that is fairly popular, and a lot of people do this. So if you go out here to Telerik.com and you come all the way down to free tools, there's a VB.NET to C# converter. Take it for what it is. Like, you can type in all of your VB. I can switch it around, and it spits out C#, right? So if language is what you're trying to upgrade, not just frameworks, then start here. It's going to give you all the C#, and it's we have heard folks use this quite a bit, and it's fairly robust, and it just transforms your VB code to C# if that's what you're wanting to do. So hopefully, Ethan, that gives you a starting point. Okay. Ed, you're back, my friend?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we are trying to answer a couple of questions, dive a little bit more into the Blazor Hybrid story, and see how good is this for you. And again, for each of these things, this code, you don't have to follow along right now because it's a lot of code here that I'm trying to show you. All of this should be up on my GitHub repo. Let's go check here. So that's github.com whack my name, and some of the things that I'm showing you here, they're all out here. So there's Angular, there is React, and there's Blazor everywhere. So all of these things are Blazor MAUI. So these are all things that I'm showing you that are all up on my GitHub repo. Just to showcase a couple of things that were asked, right? If I am bringing in Blazor inside of my desktop or my mobile app through .NET MAUI, how native is it, right? Is it Blazor just because it can just render my HTML, CSS, or can I do some native things? And the answer is yes, because even though it's a Blazor UI, you are doing this inside of .NET MAUI, which means you have the bootstrapping, you have the platform APIs to do all types of native things with Blazor. So take a look at this. If I do a file, new project, And if I do a MAUI app here, if I do a Blazor Hybrid app, that's where I'm starting, right? So it's a MAUI Blazor Hybrid app is what I'm starting out as. So if you look at MAUI program.cs, nothing's different about here. I got my MAUI BlazorWebView. I am doing developer tools if I'm doing this in debug mode, and that's about it. Main page.xaml, nothing different here. I have my BlazorWebView and I'm pointing it to index.html and I'm pointing it to the first main component. www remains the same. I got my CSS in here. I got some index.html. This is the boilerplate index.html for all of your Blazor, loading up your app. So none of that is different. What's different here is once we get to the actual Blazor components. So in my pages, I have some index.razor. Keep in mind, this is absolutely a Blazor component that I'm writing, absolutely meant for web, except there is no web here. I'm writing this as a part of .NET MAUI. I just have the SDK style project, or the Razor style project, so I know how to render. But this view is a Blazor view, but it is still running on top of .NET MAUI. So take a look at this. I used to be able to do things like add using Microsoft MAUI Essentials. I don't have to do that anymore because it's now baked in. Because if I look at my my CS proj here, you see that use MAUI is set to true. So with that flag, I already have those APIs. I don't need to bring those in anymore. But now from my Blazor code, I want to get to some native things. So here's the survey prompt, which is how it starts out. I have a button here that says do some native stuff, right? And then I have a couple of H3 tags, so very HTML things. And then I have a code section here where I'm writing some C# code as a part of my Blazor UI. Now, Ed is going to be the first one to tell you that you don't need to do this. Hold on for a second. Another phone call that I don't need to take right now. So this code section here, Ed and me come from the world of ASP.NET Classic, which was the good old days of writing spaghetti code where your markup and your business logic was all together. And it's not good practice because it's hard to test and just things just get very spaghettied up quickly. So if you're doing this, move that code section off to a separate file, make it a partial class. You can do index.razor.cs, in which case you can just move this entire code section off to that separate file, and then at runtime the compiler puts that whole class together. So make it a partial class and just put it away. So here I have a function here that's being invoked when that on click of that button is called, right? So classic Blazor on click invoke this function. And here I want to do some things where I'm tapping into some native things. So let's run this actually on, let's do an iPad Pro. And let's go fire this up on an iPad Pro. And let's see what that does. So it's going to be a cold boot. It's doing a build for all the platforms first. Okay, so this is a MAUI app, so it just knows that I know how to run on iOS, I know how to run on Android, and so on. So I just want to showcase what this looks like if you're doing Blazor. So out comes this app here, which is classic Hello World Blazor. I'm really surprised, Ed, that in like 4 years, like they have not actually changed the Hello World Blazor template. It's still the same.
It's coming.
It's coming. Okay,
.NET 8, this will change very slightly.
Okay, all right.
There are changes coming.
Okay, so I have the classic Blazor Hello World thing. I have my counter, I have my fetch, I have my things, but here's the index.razor. So this entire view is being painted by my Blazor view here, which is index.razor. And I do have that button like do native stuff, right? So let's go ahead and hit that button. And now I have a few extra things. Notice how I had these H3, I had a message and I had device info. So I'm bringing in some text-based information into those H3s. So what it's saying is hello from this is the app name. It's running on portrait mode, so layouts, and then it's running with this resolution 2048 by 2732, which I think is the iPad Pro's resolution. This is the device it's running on, iPad Pro, 12.9 inch, 16 inch, and 16 GB, and it's running on iOS 16.4, so iOS versions, and it happens to be on Wi-Fi. So network here a little bit as well. Now I don't have this as a watcher, but I can flip my simulator and I can hit the button again. Now it's going to say landscape, right? So if you had a listener, then it'll flip automatically if you did that. So how did I get to all of this? Well, it's Blazor, but I have access to all of the .NET APIs, right? So here's app info. This is very much a .NET MAUI, Microsoft.MAUI, object that gives you the application model. And I can tap into the name of the object. I can go main display orientation, so layout versus or portrait versus landscape. And I go main display width and height. These are all very, very .NET MAUI specific APIs that I have ready-made access to from my Blazor code. Here's the device info giving me the device name. And here's me going into the network stack, connectivity.network access. I make sure that you do have internet. And again, this one's not foolproof, so I should have some fallback plans of 4G, 5G, 3G, whatever. You can check on the internet and the connection profile. If it's on Wi-Fi, then I say it's on Wi-Fi. So as simple as that. So I can tap into some very native things. Now let's go to the counter.razor component here for a second. It's still running on my iPad. Let's go to the counter here, and you see a few things here. I have the counter component, which still works the way it is, but I have two more buttons here: read to storage and read from storage and write from storage. So what do those do? Essentially, reading and writing from the file system, right? And just because this is Blazor doesn't mean that you cannot. So think about this. If you had a Blazor application that's a PWA, this will be a jumping through a few hoops to write to some disk, right? And sometimes use just the browser cache that you can write to or some browser storage. This is literally being written to the iOS disk or to the Android or to the Windows to the Mac disk, right? So I can read from storage. Looks like I've run this once in the past, but let's write to storage. Now you see the timestamp here. That is the timestamp of like now. So let's go back home and come back to the counter component again, read from storage. Now I get back the same timestamp, right? So how is that working? Well, it's simple. I have access to something called the preferences. This is my counter.razor. In my preferences, I can set and I can get. So this is a key value pair. It's just a dictionary. So I'm using a last used, timestamp. I'm writing it, and when I'm reading it, I'm just reading the last used, the same key. Obviously you want to do some, null checks to make sure that key actually exists before you read that and so on. So I can do this all day long. Now, if you wanted to do this securely, like maybe it's just some credentials or something that you're writing that needs to be secure, because this is essentially being just written out as a flat file. You don't get to actually see the flat file. You could on Mac Catalyst or Windows, you can actually see the flat file. On iOS or Android, it's just slightly more difficult to see the file that's been written out. But if you wanted to encrypt that file, you absolutely could. There's an API called Secure Storage, but guess what? That needs more permissions. Both on Android and on iOS, you need to have more permissions. Windows and Mac are fine because you're already on desktop, but those need additional permissions before you can do secure storage. Now, the picking of the photo thing, that's kind of fun. So here's a Blazor UI, and I want to tap into the camera, or I want to go into your media storage because you take pictures with your mobile devices, right? So I can do pick a pic, in which case I get a very iOS specific window that comes up. This is not my window. This is just the iOS window saying, here's a media picker, here's your app gallery, and out comes some very deep inside the simulator are these sample images. So I can pick one sample image, and out it comes in my Blazor view. So how is that working out? So that image is being rendered. Keep in mind, this is a Blazor view. It's just a counter component. There's an image tag in here, right? So there's a button. That's the button I clicked, and I said pick a photo, right? And when you clicked on that button, we came down here and we said media picker. Async and await. So we want to do things asynchronously in .NET MAUI. We just said pick a photo. Media picker options. If you wanted to something, title, just choose something. And then once the user does choose something, you can have access to the full file path of that image that you chose from the media gallery. And I'm handing off that entire file path to my Blazor application to say, go render this. So just think about this for a second. We took an image file, which is deep inside the simulator, and we are rendering it inside of an image tag. And to top it off, I can actually have some, this is convention based in Blazor, so I can do counter.razor, and I can also do counter.razor.css. So I have some styling. You saw that image in here? It is kind of nicely centered, right, in terms of height and width. So that's because I have a little bit of CSS here that's checking the max width and height, and is just making it nice and centered. So all types of HTML and CSS at play here, from a very Blazor specific view, but it's dealing with some very native UI components. Now, let me show you one more.
Nice to mention, Sam, when we're talking about file paths, the MAUI APIs normalize those file paths for us if we use some of the built-in, I don't know what they call them. There's like a library of default file paths that we can access. So if you access, for example, the My Documents folder, if you use the one provided by MAUI, it'll resolve to whatever is equivalent to My Documents on the given platform.
Yeah, absolutely. It does some abstractions. Let me check here. Josh is saying audio is out. I can still hear you. Ed, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, as far as I could tell, everything's still working normally. So I recommended that he restart his GoToWebinar.
Okay, good. Dennis is asking about templates. Yeah, we do actually have some templates that try to help out. So you can do a couple of different ways, which we can actually dive in and show you some of our templates and how those differ. You can bring in our NuGet packages starting from a Microsoft template, or you can start with our template, however it is that you want. Oh, so Dennis had actually used the VB.NET to C# converter. It's not perfect, but it's it's pretty good.
As well.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so let's go back to this, and I'll show you some of our templates and see how you can work with this. Now, when you go to the fetch data, Blazor does its usual thing of there's a weather service that's local. There's nothing that's being brought out, and it's just some fake data here. But we are on a .NET MAUI app, so we actually can use the user's geolocation. So let's click on fetch data. I'm trying to remember. Oh no, this is a new installation, so I have not run this app on this particular iPad, so it's asking me this. So if this looks familiar, like you see that, allow MAUI native Blazor to use your location. Do not say that you're going to stop the user, but clearly this is an iOS prompt, right? And Android will do the same thing. So essentially this view is telling the .NET MAUI runtime that, hey, this app is trying to use your geolocation. Do you have permission as user? So I'm going to say yes. When I do that, I get a device location. You see that, the 37 something and then 1 minus 122, that's the geolocation. This is running in a simulator, so that's likely the geolocation of Apple's HQ in Cupertino. But if you run this on a real iPad or a real iPhone or an Android device, you get the real geolocation. So how did we do that? Nothing, it's just absolutely nothing to be done. There is just an H3 here, right? And what I'm doing here is when the page loads up, we are doing an on-initialized async, and we are asking for the forecast data, which is what Blazor does. We are now, in addition to that, we are asking for geolocation. Notice this comes from Microsoft.maui.devices.sensor. So we now going into the MAUI abstraction and asking for a geolocation, and we're getting the get last known location. Once I have it, you might want to do more checks to make sure you have it actually. Then I'm just bringing out the lat and the long, just to show you that I can read geolocation. Now, this being Blazor, if this app is running on a browser, sure, you can read the geolocation from the browser, but you don't have to, because now it's a true native app, right? So somebody was asking us the question, like, from Blazor running inside of MAUI, can I do native things? Absolutely. Everything that MAUI exposes out as a platform-specific API through an abstraction, you can do all of it from Blazor, right? There's nothing stopping you.
Just going to say, it's probably worth mentioning if you're going to be writing this where you have a web version of this app as well, you'll have to like wrap an interface around some of these features so you can swap them out with the web version of it. So if you're running, say, geolocation in a web browser, you're not going to have access to the MAUI API. You'll have to use the JavaScript-based geolocation API or a NuGet package that pulls that in as a C# library for you.
Yeah. And actually, we can look at a solution where you are, so think about who Blazor Hybrid is meant to, attract. It's Blazor developers who are already doing stuff for web. You don't want to give up on the web just because now you can do it with MAUI. You want to have the same solution from which you can serve up both the web and native apps. So let's look at that actually, and then we'll look at some more templates because there were some questions about that. So let's close this. And let's look at this one here. This also is in my GitHub repo. So again, some of this is a little bit of involved coding, so which we don't want you folks to have to do, with us. So you can take a look at all of the repos just to kind of see how this works out. Okay, so this is a solution that Ed has written a whole ebook about. Ed, how can I pull that up? Your Blazor web in one solution.
Telerik.com/whitepapers.
Okay, so if you wanted to do this, there's a whole white paper to help you out.
Lots of good ebooks and stuff up here.
Yeah, there you go. Blazor Hybrid and web in one solution. So check out the ebook that Ed has written. He's the authority on this, but I'm going to just show you this really quickly. This is a solution which is a combination of a few projects. So what we have here is a couple of Blazor web projects here, the client and the server that's shared. You don't have to have the shared one. This is with the ASP.NET backend. You can just go with a Blazor straight up server side or WebAssembly. What you will notice here is in this project, I don't have the pages directory, which is where my Blazor components live. Because I don't want them to live just in my Blazor project. I want the same UI to power my native apps on desktop and mobile, as well as my my web apps. So that thing has just been taken out. I also have a .NET MAUI project with Blazor Hybrid. This is the exact solution that you get when you do MAUI new project Blazor Hybrid. Same exact thing. I've taken the pages folder out because I want them to be in a separate folder or a separate project by itself, which is this one here. This is called an RCL, a Razor class library. It's not an executable, it's just a library that's referenced from both the MAUI project and the Blazor for Web project. And this is where I have my pages. This is where I have my shared UI for index or counter so that I can serve it up from both web and native. So the benefit of this is, let's just do the web here first. And the way we wire this up is in my imports.razor here, in my Blazor web project, I'm going to bring in that shared repository, right? So I have access to that. In my app.razor, I'm, instead of just pointing the router straight away to the main, main layout, I have to go through the shared UI project. So I'm just pointing to the main layout that's in the shared project and not in my Blazor project. That's about it. Beyond that, everything is the same. So let's go into the Blazor web project, and we're going to run this first and start that up. Now, this being the web project, it knows how to run on Chrome. It is running. For some reason, it doesn't bring up my Chrome for some Blazor apps. So I can go to this localhost 5000. So here's Blazor, running on the web exactly as you imagine. So this is index.razor. Notice here I am reading the platform that you're running on. This is kind of hard-coded, but you will get more of it when we run this on MAUI. And I'm reading the window dimensions here, which is JavaScript. Again, you can read geolocation from the browser or from MAUI if you want. Here's my counter component, and everything works the way it is. This is Blazor for web, except none of these two pieces of Razor components were actually in my Blazor web directory. They're coming from the shared directory. And the benefit of that is I can have the same UI now drive my native projects. So let's switch up the startup project here to the MAUI one. And this is running on Mac Catalyst. Let's actually run this on the iPad Pro. That way we'll see the device a little bit better. Start that. Let me actually close down my VM that I don't need right now. All right, it's trying to bring this up on my iPad Pro. Same exact app here. So again, this exact project of Blazor Everywhere, this is something that's out on my GitHub repo. So here you can see it's the same Blazor project, same index.razor, but now the Blazor is running on platform iOS, because this is essentially an iPad, right? And you get the window dimension of whatever it is. This is iPad, and then the counter component works exactly the way it is, so everything is good. However, let's change this up a little bit. Here's the advantage. So now that we have this running, hold on. Oh no, I fired this up again. Stop. Okay, here's the benefit. I can go in here and change up things that will have an impact everywhere. So here's the Blazor button. Here's the CSS. This is app wide, so I can change up this to whatever I want. So background color of, let's just call it red, right? And we're going to comment out that other line. So we're changing up the default color, and let's just run this instead of the iPad Pro. Let's run this on a Mac Catalyst now. And let's do the same debug, start with our debugging. So this is the benefit. It's the same exact UI, Blazor UI, that's powering the same UI across native apps and web apps, which is really nice. So here out comes the Mac desktop application. Notice how now it says, hey, I'm running Blazor now, I'm running on Mac Catalyst. So it recognizes that this is macOS, and it's even if it's kind of iOS, it's still called Mac Catalyst. My window dimension did change. And if I go to the counter component, now I have a red button as compared to the blue button, right? So, and I can bring this up on my Blazor app on my web app, as well as Blazor on my iOS or Android. It's going to be red everywhere because it's a shared UI. So this is one of the main benefits. So to kind of talk through what Ed was talking about, like how do we switch up the implementations? You can do this your own way. But the thing that Ed and me both like is an interface. So here's my shared service. It's just called an iPlatform.info. So I can get the platform name and I can get the window size. It's just an interface, right? So this is all that I have in the shared repo. And then I want to have separate implementations of this in my Blazor for web, as well as Blazor for MAUI, right? So you can do this however you want. So here's the MAUI implementation, which is super simple, actually. Let's look at services, platform info. MAUI device info, platform name, just straight up. I can read the platform name anytime, and I want to get to the window size. I can get main display info, width and height, right? So the dotnet MAUI side of things are pretty simple, so I can just read that anytime. If I have to go look at how we do this for web, it's a little bit more complicated because now I have to go talk to JavaScript. Again, I don't have to, just to kind of prove a point that I can. So here is the same service now for web apps. Here's platform info. This is actually bringing in this browser service, and it's trying to get the width and the height, and the browser service essentially is the one that brings in that JS interrupt. So I can actually go read the JavaScript provided window dimensions. See that get dimensions? That's a JavaScript file sitting somewhere in my www root right here, window dimensions. See that width? That's just reading the window inner width and window inner height. So straight up JavaScript, that's what I'm reading to bring up those dimensions from my Blazor app running inside of the web. Ed, can I read, do I have to talk to JavaScript if I have to read the window dimensions in a browser, or does Blazor provide this in any other way?
No, but you can pull in a NuGet package
okay.
That will do this for you, so you don't have to write the JavaScript code. You can just write the C#.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of NuGet packages out there to do almost all of the JavaScript interrupt stuff these days. So any of the browser APIs that you need to access, you can usually get those as third-party packages off of NuGet and access those. And there's even some that are built with source generators, so they didn't even have to get written by a human.
Nice. Yeah,
they're
Blazor is such
out of the specs.
Yeah, Blazor is a rich ecosystem. You got so much going on. And then MAUI is catching up fast on some of the APIs and other things. Now, there were some questions about our UI in particular, so let me show that off really quickly. Let me show you first the MAUI side. Let's see, where would that be? Let's actually go to the file system. So if you are interested, like what can Telerik do for you? I get all of this stuff, but I'm interested in MAUI. Let me close down all of this. Let me just see what I can do straight up with some Telerik UI. So let me show you that. So if I go to the mobile components here, or you can do desktop as well, it's the same MAUI suite that we're going to point it to. You don't need to trust anything that I'm saying. Go to the app store so you can see some of this UI. So all of this UI is out there for you to use. This is all 60 plus native UI components. So we have been busy on all of these things are desktop first and mobile first as well. which are particularly tricky for data forms and data grids. And we've been hard at this, so it's gotten some legs here. If I look at the demos here, we got a couple of demos for you to look at that are actually in the app stores. So there's a .NET MAUI control showcase. So go to the iOS store or the Android store or the Microsoft Windows store and look for Telerik. This is an app that you're going to find. Or we have another one called CryptoTracker, which is really cool, that I'll show you how it does things here. So all of this code is also open sourced on GitHub, so you can see how we build a full-scale app with all of our UI inside of it, and then see how that's working out. When you install this, there's a little installer that comes in and does this for you. So let's go into my my documents here, progress. You can keep this however you want. Here I have some of my Xamarin and my MAUI bits. I think this is not the latest one. We have a .NET MAUI release that's 6.1.0, which actually has .NET 8 support as well. But this one's the older one. I'm going to go into my examples here and look at the control sample gallery. And let's bring up this solution in my VS Code. So this here is a control gallery, exactly what it sounds like. So it has all of the controls all in one place, which makes it a very busy app. But this is all MVVM without any MVVM frameworks that we are bringing in. So let's go ahead and run this. It might take a while because it's a big app to build. I don't remember exactly when I had run this for the last time, but it's got all of our Telerik .NET MAUI UI all in one place, and it's just ready for you to build. Okay, so that wasn't too long of a build. It's trying to come up now. I ran this on Mac Catalyst. So you should get a Mac desktop application out. Yep, there you go. So for those of you who are considering a greenfield desktop app today, and I'm saying this slowly because this is big, what I'm trying to say. If you are trying to start a new desktop application today, my advice, again, you can do your way, my advice is to go with .NET MAUI, which is not something I say lightly, because you can have WPF with all of its maturity, all of its complexity. You can have WinForms, which is very productive, but I'm saying MAUI because this is the way forward. This is going to immediately give you a source code that is ready to be cross-platform. It is already cross-platform. It's going to work the same way on Windows and Mac. And then eventually, if you want to add on, maybe your customers are asking for mobile apps, the same code base is going to serve up a native mobile app. So yes, you might not be as well served with all of the complex UI, but it's a great starting point to have a truly cross-platform shared code base. So all of the UI that we offer in .NET MAUI, it's all right there for you. So you can check it out. And again, you don't have to run this locally. You can also download this on your iPad or your Android device, and you can check out some of the UI, like check out the data grid and some of the charts and graphs. This is a full-fledged data grid with filtering, sorting, everything that you can think of. Everything works. These are some of the templates that I was talking about that are really nice, like the frozen columns. I love the fact that I can freeze up a column and then I can scroll all I want, and my columns stay the way they are. So some very desktop friendly features. I can right click, I can do context menus, I can do things like that. And then charts and graphs are always popular because who doesn't need charts and graphs? So we have dozens and dozens of different types of charts. Oh, this one's a chat example. This is going into like chat GPT type integrations if you wanted to. I wanted to go to the chart, not the chat. So here's the chart demos. We got area charts, bar charts, financial series, line series. So pretty much everything you can think of, we got you covered. So if you're coming from WPF to a MAUI desktop, you might not have everything, but it's still a good starting point. Tell us what you need, and then we'll build it for you. We are working with some enterprise customers very, very closely who are coming from WPF to .NET MAUI, and they're asking for more and more desktop-friendly things, and that's what we are building. So take a look at this, and all of this will work just fine on iOS, Android as well. Okay, so that's the control gallery, and then let me show you the other one here, which I really like because how it's done. Let's show you the CryptoTracker. This is an app for fake cryptocurrencies. Ed and me love investing our thousands and thousands of dollars into crypto, which is up to you if you wanted to. But this one's a cryptocurrency tracker app. Everything is fake about here, the data part of it at least. But I can run this on an iPhone 14. just to kind of showcase what you can do in terms of reusability. So the point I'm trying to make here is .NET MAUI as a code base is meant to be for native. Oh, hold on, it's not being able to execute. That's not fun. Okay, Visual Studio, close for once, and we can bring it up. Let's go to the CryptoTracker here. We can open up the solution. Okay, can I not run this on an iPhone 14? Sure can. Yeah, it was just Visual Studio being Visual Studio sometimes. Okay, so the thing that I'm trying to say is just because .NET MAUI, oh, I got multiple emulators open here. Hold on, close this. Just because .NET MAUI gives you a code base for serving up mobile and desktop apps together doesn't mean that your experience should be the same. And this is true for Blazor or MAUI, however you want to do it. You should cater to the platform that you're serving it up on. So being responsive, reusing your UI is important. So this is all native, okay? We'll get to Blazor in a second, where you can do all types of responsive things you want, but this is straight up a native app. So this looks very mobile first, kind of, right? So it's telling you all of the cryptocurrencies here. I can tap on Bitcoins, and then it actually navigates to a second page, right? So notice the navigation here. This is a completely separate view. It's showing you how Bitcoin is doing over a month, over 6 months. And these are some of our fancy graphs and charts, but that's beside the point. I can do candlestick, all sorts of fancy things. And then when I come back to this list. This is very classic mobile because many mobile apps end up showing a list of things, right? You have a list view that shows you a list of things, and when you tap on one thing, you go to navigate to a different view, and you come back and so on. So classic, web UI or native UI for mobile. So let's close this, and we're going to switch this up to be running on a Mac Catalyst, or even an iPad will do the same thing because we're looking for bigger real estate here. So let's run this now on an iPad. And again, this source code, by the way, is open source on GitHub, so you can check it out exactly how we do this, how we render some of the charts and graphs. Now it's going to bring this up on a Mac Catalyst. So Mac desktop, almost here. Okay, boom. So now it's a Mac desktop application, right? Still .NET MAUI, still Mac Catalyst, but notice the difference here. Just because we have more real estate, and you can do like if it's more than certain number of pixels, switch to this mode, or this is kind of a little bit more broad. You can just say if Mac Catalyst do this, if iOS iPad do this, and so on. So you'll notice that here I have the same exact thing. So I can tap on each one of the cryptocurrencies, and then I have a view which shows you how it's doing, except now these two views are just put together side by side. You are doing a MAUI app, you do not want to recreate the UI once for desktop and once for mobile. You want to reuse that desktop as best as possible, right? So here, this UI looks very familiar, right? This was the same list view we saw on a mobile device, and then we navigated to this other view on mobile. And this is the same view, it's just being loaded up side by side. So this is a very common trick that you can do, really saves you a lot of time. So let's take a look at how this is done. So let's go in here. I'm going to close down some of the emulators here, close that down. Okay, so MAUI program starts out here, nothing different about this. Let's go to my views here. So you'll notice that I have a couple of views. These are views that are not tied to any platform per se. I have a header view, I have a data grid view, I have a list view, and so on. This is the selection view, which is essentially just giving you one big grid and then a list view inside of it, which is giving you that list of cryptocurrencies. This one's all stacked up with like item templates and data binding and all types of things. So these are my views, and they are separate from my platforms. Then I go into my let's see, app XAML is where we have it. No, this is just no, it's not here. AppXAML.cs, yeah, this one here. So notice how when the app is starting up, we can say where you want to be. So if you're on Android or if you're on iOS, right? So now we are saying if you are mobile, then your first root page should be the coin selection page, which is the Bitcoin, which cryptocurrency do you want to select? Go directly to that page, and that page has the list view. If you're on Mac Catalyst, then this main page is the one that you've got to use. And if you're on Windows or Mac Catalyst, then go use this. So we are switching up the first view. and that navigation page, that view comes from here. So here's the desktop page, right? Notice how this desktop page essentially brings in that tab view, and then inside of it there is somewhere is that list view, and then it brings up that other the detail view right next to it, as compared to the coin selection view, which is the first starting point of the mobile view. It's just a straight up data grid, and then it's just an info with the list view in it. So what I'm trying to say is do those checks so that you can reuse some of that UI. You don't need to recreate the UI from scratch between mobile and desktop. Does that make sense for people? Let's see, any questions? David likes it, thank you, great. Or maybe Ed answered a question. Yeah, just decompile. Is there any love for just decompile? I love that thing of how you can just decompile .NET assemblies. Okay, so nothing else here. Chat room. Ed, let me know if there's anything I can respond to. Okay, let's talk about one more thing here. Let's talk about so that's the Telerik .NET MAUI, just a straight up native suite. But let's talk about some Telerik UI inside Blazor UI inside of MAUI. So this is another project, and again, this is also up on my GitHub if you want. So let's look at repositories, and that's the project that I'm talking about, Telerik Blazor UI. So it is a super simple .NET MAUI with Blazor Hybrid solution. There's nothing else to this except for file new project hello world. There is a dependency that we're bringing in. So if I look at my dependencies here, let's look at any one of them, like the Mac Catalyst one here. So if I look at my NuGet packages here, I am bringing in Telerik UI for Blazor. This is the NuGet package for all things Blazor UI for the web. This package has no business being in a native app like desktop or mobile, but we can bring that in because my CS proj says, hey, I'm a SDK.Razor style project. I can do this all day long. So here, when I bring in that dependency, which is right here, package reference, version 4.4, I don't know if that's the latest one, Ed, or there's been more after this, it doesn't actually complain because it's fine. It's a Razor style, SDK Razor style project. With that, I have to bring in some more things. In my import.razor, I have to bring in some of the Telerik Blazor binaries. You can see where I'm going with this. I'm trying to render Telerik Blazor UI inside of my MAUI app, right? So nothing else in here. Index.html, this is pretty standard stuff that our Blazor documentation is going to guide you through. A couple of libraries here. There's a script reference here for a JavaScript file. This is the WebView that Blazor brings in. There's a CSS reference for some CSS, that's Kenda UI style CSS that we bring in. And that's about it. And then the main layout, I am wrapping up everything inside this thing called the Telerik root component, which is a way for us to come inside and know the DOM a little better, right, Ed? And so I can do like floating windows. I can do, modal windows inside of the DOM. So is that kind of a good explanation of the root component?
Yeah, it basically sets a point for the Telerik components to be able to draw, like you said, with like a window pop-up, and it also sets up some of the services that are needed to run some of the components.
Okay, all right, so I do that, and then I can get to my index.razor page, which is pretty much the standard index.razor page that you see in the Blazor project that's scaffolded for you, except I am adding on a whole bunch of things. So here's my survey prompt with the welcome. Then I'm adding a Telerik button, I'm adding a barcode, I'm adding a calendar, I'm adding a date picker. There's like a circular gauge, and there's like there's a card view, so a whole bunch of things, right? So let's go ahead and run this on a Mac Catalyst here first. Okay, so out comes a Mac desktop application. This is Mac Catalyst powered by .NET MAUI, but the whole UI here is a BlazorWebView, and the whole UI is being powered by index.razor. This nav part is separate. So here is my index.razor. here's my server prompt, but I have a Telerik button, I have a barcode, I have calendars which are fully functional. It's a really rendered calendar here. I have a card view, I have a circular gauge, and then here is a date picker, which is a trick that Ed showed me. Notice how if I tap on this, I get the date picker, but it's kind of meant for mouse and keyboard. It's small, but if you render the same UI components, notice how in the date picker there is this thing called the adaptive mode now. So I can just turn that to auto. So then when I go run the same app on a smaller device here, like an iPhone, I'll have a slightly different experience. So some of this is going to come down to you, how you want to do responsiveness. If you are using some of our UI, we will like to help you out. But again, it's not a silver wand. So some of it will have to be you figuring out what the user experience looks like on a smaller form factor, with whatever UI that you need. So here's the same UI. Index.razor is the same exact UI that we're rendering. Here's the date picker. So now when I tap on that, I get a full screen date picker because now it's touch friendly. Because now I'm an iOS or Android, so this is how I would interact with that. So the same UI.
We have that for all of our UI components, or for all of our input components, rather.
Components, which is really nice, yeah. So any type of pickers that you can choose, just set the adaptive mode to auto, and then we will, figure out what platform you're on. And then some of it is going to come down to your CSS, media queries. If you want a certain experience on a width of this pixel versus width of that pixel, that's something you can always do on your own, right? So we try to help you out. So we are here to tell you that if you are using any of our Blazor UI, right, which is a lot of our Blazor UI components for web, which is a lot, like in 4+ years, we have Ed and the team has been super busy. So all of this UI component system that you see for Blazor, which is meant squarely for web apps, now there's a whole new tab here called Blazor Hybrid. Every one of those UI components are also welcome on MAUI with the Blazor Hybrid story with full platform API access and with adaptive rendering. Now you can do this all, right? So and we will also stand by you. So if you're doing this on .NET MAUI on desktop or web or mobile, and you run into issues, we are here to support you. So all of Telerik's Blazor UI goodness is running perfectly fine with mobile and desktop apps, which is again not a light statement to make. Yeah.
I've got a good component we can show real quick. If you click on demos, this is very topical for what we're covering. So if you're if you're coming from a XAML background, this is going to be super helpful if you're doing Blazor Hybrid. Under the layout section, you will see a grid layout, and there is also a stack layout.
Okay, so, hold on. Layouts, okay, I see. Grid layout, okay.
Yeah, so this is a, not like a data grid, but a layout component. So you can lay out your views. This would help with your example that you just gave if you wanted to lay out those components a little bit better on those views. So there's the grid layout that gives you the ability to lay things out in a grid, which is possible with CSS, but maybe you're not a CSS guru. So if you click on View Source on that tab, Sam, you can see the layout is done very similar to how you would do it in Xamarin.Forms.
This is very XAML friendly. Yeah. Oh, this is exactly XAML. Yeah. Okay.
And then we also have the
layout you said
companion for this, and that one, if you go back to the last page, it's easier to find, I think. It's called the stack layout.
Oh, okay.
All right. So notice you have your horizontal and vertical options on that one.
Yeah.
This is just laying things out in kind of a tube in either direction, either vertically or horizontally, and it works like the stack layout in Xamarin.Forms.
Okay, so stack orientation, you're just setting it horizontal, vertical, and you got some cards here. Okay, so I see that. Yeah, interesting. This is, by the way, a good thing to point out because sometimes we forget. So let me go back into .NET MAUI for a second. A good thing to keep in mind if you're using the stack layouts. So if I go into user interface, where is it? Layouts, okay. You can do absolute, you can do bindable, flex, grid, stack layout. So stack layout is for you to stack things vertically or horizontally. In the past, we used to have a stack panel, right? And you can still do that. You could have a stack panel, and then you would set the orientation property to vertical or horizontal. Please don't do that anymore. They would really like you to stop doing that, because they have now made you a vertical stack and a horizontal stack, okay? So this is exactly what it is, like stack layout, orientation is horizontal. Don't do that, the performance is so much better. So they have it different, like there's stack layout and there's a vertical stack layout and there's a horizontal stack layout. So this is exactly the same thing, but the performance is about 30% better than having a stack layout with that orientation of vertical. So same exact idea, but the engineering team cannot say this enough. Like they would really want you to use the vertical and the horizontal stack layouts instead of just the stack layout. Okay, now Ed, let me ask you a question here. Have you seen, so when we go to Blazor Hybrid story with Telerik UI, have you ever tried doing Blazor UI inside of a traditional desktop app like WinForms or WPF?
Personally, I have not.
Shall we try? We have a little bit of time, so if folks want to see me fail, we can do that, because we just have this app open, which is bringing in Blazor Hybrid inside of a .NET MAUI app. But what if we can do the same thing on a straight up WinForms or WPF app? So let's go back to Windows 11, my good old VM. I do not run heat in my office in wintertime because the VM and the fans are good enough for me. Let's see if I can go in here. We can start with that BlazorWebView. Now this may or may not work because we might have to do some work to figure this out. So this, going back, is a WPF app, right? So this has got nothing to do with MAUI, but we have we do have that WebView 2 package that we're bringing in, right? Let's go back and check. Yep, we have a WebView, and that WebView should be able to look at www.root and find that index.html, and then we are dropping the counter razor component in here, nothing else to that. So now this one here is, I might not be able to do that on a straight up WPF app. Let's just see the project file. .NET 7 Windows. Let's give it a try because I'm not sure what it's going to complain about. Let's see. All right, packages, manage, limit packages. Do I have my sources figured out? Oh, I don't even have a source. So hold on for a second. I'm going to go try getting this. So let's do docs because I keep forgetting. And sometimes I'll add the source, the NuGet package. Sometimes I take it out and I forget what the source is. So let's do restoring NuGet packages. I just want the URL. Where is the URL? No, not there. Mac. Getting started with NuGet packages, and I just want to set the source so I can pull down my source. There it is. That URL. We're going to copy that URL. Now we're going to go over to Windows here. We can close down some of the simulators, go to Windows. Okay, so before I do the package, I need to set my NuGet package options. Okay, package sources, right? And again, this might be a good trick for you to know if you're using any type of Telerik UI, it's the same everywhere. So you get the NuGet source, which is the straight up one. And then I can add more things to it. This one here, we're going to call this the Telerik source. And for the source, we're going to do that. So nuget.telerik.com whack v3 index.json. No, that's not a thing. So let's do an update. Okay, so now it points to Telerik, and I think that should be it. It might ask me for my credentials the first time I try doing this. So let's go to manage, and let's switch to the Telerik source. Okay, here we go. So this is my, whoops, my credentials here. I have multiple internal accounts. So this one's my personal one, just so I can browse. Okay, here we go. So now let's look for, it should be, hitting that NuGet source and try to pulling back all of the Telerik NuGet packages that are out there. So you see all of the, stuff from Kendo UI, just mock, data components, documents, libraries, a whole bunch of stuff, right? So here, if I have Blazor, if I search for Blazor, there is report viewer Telerik UI for Blazor. Oh, we are up to 4.5.0, interestingly, so I was one level back. So can I bring this inside of a WPF app? I don't know, we'll give it a try. Output, it's trying to show me something. Okay, licenses.
4.5 just shipped about a week ago too, Sam. That's brand new.
I am brand new. I am in. Hello, look at that. Okay, so I am bringing in Telerik UI for Blazor, the latest bits here, 4.5.0. Keep in mind, I'm doing this in a WPF app, right? So we will have to do a few things to make sure I am all set. First is imports.razor. This is not bringing in much. So I'm going to go and copy those things that I know I'm going to need, which is these two. Yeah, what else do I need? No, I think that's it. We'll see what it complains about, and then we'll fix it. All right, csproj. Now it has a reference to Telerik UI for Blazor. Nice, 4.5.0. Okay, so I fixed up my imports.razor. Index.html has to have a few more things, right? Because this is just the Blazor CSS.
We need our style sheets and a little JavaScript interrupt.
Yep. Okay. So this is the style sheet, and we're going to get that JS interrupt. These are all, by the way, well documented. So look at any Blazor getting started guide. It's going to point you to the same things. Wait, this style sheet. No, that I should have that style sheet. This is the two that I need. So here's my Kendo UI CSS and my Telerik Blazor JavaScript. And what else do I need? Main layout. Oh, I should make that a Telerik root component.
Yep.
And let's go here to, oh, I don't actually have a main layout here because I'm just pointing it to the index.html. Maybe I don't need it.
There has to be some sort of entry point. Is it only a counter component on this app?
Yeah, this is just pointing to a counter component. This has got nothing else. So if you look at the, BlazorWebView is just saying, hey, go to the counter component. So,
okay. So it'd be around the counter component.
Yeah. Normally you would have a layout which brings it all together. This one just doesn't have anything to it. So some things might not work, but then again, some things might. So let's go and try to copy some things here. Let's start with a button.
Hang on, we still need one more setup.
What is that?
Go to MAUI program CS on your current.
Oh, you're right. So this one actually has the add Telerik Blazor.
Yep.
Ooh, where would I add that to my WPF app?
Is there dependency injection?
No.
Uh-oh.
Well, there is this, which is how Blazor injects
service
itself.
Collection.
Yeah. This is essentially pointing it to. Will this work?
I think you're good right there. Yep. Go below the add WPF line.
Yeah.
Paste that in.
You think?
Then,
it actually doesn't have a, there is no builder. It's not using
that's
.NET
okay.
code.
That's okay. We'll fix it. We just need the last part, really.
We just need the service collection.
Take those two items out and change it to service collection.
If I can type. Okay. Just that, you think?
That should do it.
Okay. All right. Well, give it a try. So let's start with the button and the barcode. Okay. We're going to come into our counter.razor here. There's my increment button. We'll let that stay. and we'll try to render a Telerik button and a barcode. It's complaining about things, which is fine. It's not been built. So does this build? Okay, it builds. Visual Studio is still being Visual Studio. that's okay. So shall we run this? Yeah, look at that. First try. Thank you, Mr. Sherbno. That is all that we needed. So look at that. A WPF app, rendering not just Blazor inside of it. That counter component, that's a Blazor counter. The layout is completely out of whack here, but you get the point. So that's the counter component. And then here's my button and here's my barcode. So now I'm getting adventurous because I can do more things here. I can just move this down. I can give it a break. Nope. That. And maybe do one more so I have a nice separation. So now let's bring in more things. We have the calendar, the date picker. It's not going to be as nice without the root layout. Let's do the calendar.
You can always just wrap the entire thing in a root layout.
Oh, I see. Okay.
A root component.
So barcode.
Start above your H1 and end below the last component, the Telerik root layout.
Okay.
Root component.
Let's do the circular gauge here. Okay, we'll bring that in a second. Let's just see if these render, because now these are some really advanced UI. I got the calendar and the circular gauge, all inside of a WPF app. Ain't that beautiful? No.
Build
error. Yeah, I didn't even bring in the other things that I needed.
Missing some code, some fields on the form.
Yep, there we go. So that's all easy to bring in. Oh wait, I already have a code component. I just want to get these. All right, so now I have a min, max, so the date time, and I have the date. I have the date picker, which I'm not using yet, but does this build? Yes. Okay, so not looking very good, but you kind of still, see the point here. Can I make this any bigger? Okay, there you go. So there's the barcode, there's the calendar, that all works, and navigation works, and there's my circular gauge. Yay. Well, I can make this bigger and then I can see the whole thing. Now let's do what Ed was just suggesting we do. Let's go back here. So this layout is the one that holds it all together. So I'm going to copy this Telerik root component, and I'm going to come up here. You said wrap the whole thing, right?
Yeah, just put it from top to bottom.
Yeah. And we're going to close this here. Oh, look at that. IntelliSense works as well. It knows that we brought in that NuGet package, so we clearly should be doing something with it. So that's nice. All right. So now, what did we miss? We are missing the card action, which is understandable how to make it work. And let's do the date picker. Yep, there we go. So we got the circular gauge right after the calendar. Yeah, let's do the date picker right here. Okay, now we got to show that selected date is this, and it still has the adaptive mode on. That's fine. We will do a build. Build is good. Run this. Okay, look at that. So Blazor UI, Telerik button, Blazor barcode, Blazor circular gauge, Blazor calendar, and here's the date picker. That works too. Look at that. That root component is all it needed. So it's showing me the selected date from whatever I select. So this is in a WPF app. You can do the same exact thing in a WinForms app. And just like, I just chuckle at times with just some of the flexibility that we have. We like to complain a lot in the .NET world, like things are not good, tooling can be more stable, but this is amazing to me that I can take all of my Blazor UI and I can, shove it inside of a .NET MAUI app. I can do it from WPF. I can do it on WinForms. So, more and more strategies for you to try to, modernize parts of your, desktop applications. Okay. What else? Let's see. Any questions here from the chat room? Yeah, the failure is the greatest teacher, said Master Yoda. Absolutely. You should see how much we fail. Yeah, I was joking. Ed and me were at a conference recently, and we were talking about failures at the very get-go. But it's a conference where they had big rooms. I had like a big a ballroom, but excuse me, the speaker section in the front, it was just all flat. So even though it was a big room, it wasn't like a podium, because the moment you give me a podium where the speaker is standing up on something, I've done this not once but twice, where I have just fallen off the stage. So you deal with older people. We have failed in just about every way you can think of. Let's see, Dennis is also asking, I need a feature where I can specify it for the entire app. This is this something you already answered maybe?
I answered it. So when we showed the responsive setting for that component, if you go back and look, so adaptive mode, it's right there on line 21. This actually at current state has to be set at the component level on each individual component that you want to use this on. So Dennis was asking, I need a feature where I can set that setting globally. In Ajax, we used to do this in web config. So back on that Telerik root component, Sam, if you scroll up, or which app are you in?
This is the MAUI app,
so there are some global settings we've added here as well. So I don't know if you can get IntelliSense on that, but I think there's just one right now. And we've considered adding others here. Enable right to left is one of them.
I see.
So you can enable right to left language, the right to left language feature on all of the components globally through that setting.
This is interesting. So is it only, I was going to ask, like, is it only text, or does it actually try to rotate the components around as well?
It will change the UI according to the language. So some like buttons and things will actually move to the right aligned part of the screen. Yeah, so you can set that globally here. So you can say enable right to left. I think it's a true false setting. And then we would have something similar here where it would be the adaptive mode, and you'd set the adaptive mode at the root component level, and it would just filter down to all of the children. So we don't have that feature right now. And if you want to see that, go to feedback.telerik.com and post it or upvote it. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis is going to post it there. If you're also interested in that, go upvote Dennis's post when he's done.
Yeah. Let's see. Michael Holmes is asking, I realize this is not on topic, but can I upgrade a .NET 5 Razor Pages project to .NET 7 using the upgrade assistant? Yeah, right?
It probably worked very well, actually.
Yeah. So Michael, I think that's more of something what Jeff and Ed will cover next Wednesday, I think like 13th. So yeah,
I'm not even sure it's necessary for that, to be honest. You may just be able to go in and change your CS proj file to say .NET 7, and that's probably about it, because those are very new frameworks. Like 5 to 7 is not a big jump. It should be a quick upgrade.
Yeah. So back on this question, I think Dennis was asking this before. What about templates? So there is a little bit of help here. So let me close that thing down. If I do a new, no, actually, I don't want to do a new. Hold on. I want to, nope, come back. Let's just open this for a second. No, just give me a thing to open. Let's just do Maui hello. I'll show you. Let's see, do I have it installed? Maybe I took it out. Yeah, I have taken it out actually. So we can try doing this live.
Do you want to try it in Visual Studio Code, Sam?
Yeah, Visual Studio Code will definitely have it. I'm just trying to see if I'm missing that. Oh, actually, it's right here. So hold on for a second. I will try to show you this because I had taken this off. So if you do any of the installers, Dennis or anybody else watching, Xamarin or .NET MAUI, we do extra things like templates and other things. So those are included as things that you can get to. Either for the NuGet packages that are installed, as well as the Visual Studio templates are also in there. I'm trying to see where that might be. Extensions. So see that MPack, that's for Visual Studio for Mac, and then Visual Studio for Windows gets it by default. So let me see if I can pull this up. So yeah, and then I would love to show you the VS Code one as well. Oh, where are my extensions? Source code, extensions. Okay, here we go. Extensions, sources. It's getting Visual Studio stuff, and I can do an add. Why is it asking for a URL? I just want to point it to a service. Can I just? How do I bring in an MPack? Maybe that's more like it's because it's looking at Visual Studio. But I had
You're
this extension.
asking the wrong person, Sam.
I know. There's a way to open up
drop it or something. I have no idea.
No, hold on.
We're sunsetting it anyway.
Okay, well, actually, we did have the Windows one open, so let's see if I have this here or no. No, I don't have any of the Telerik ones installed. What's wrong with me? I should have them all the way. I used to. I've just cleaned up a whole bunch of them. So hold on for a second. Hold on. So in Visual Studio for Mac, which is being sunset, yes. Extensions. Oh, there it is. Okay. So installed are some of this. Browse. Okay, there it is. So
install from file.
Install from file. That's what I'm looking for. So documents, go to the latest release, MAUI, extensions, MPack, open. Yep, and install. Sure. All right, I think now I have to close it and bring it back.
Now, if you install the components on Windows from the Telerik or the Progress Control panel, it will automatically install the extensions for Visual Studio as part of that process.
Oh no, I'm not seeing my extension yet.
So this is really easy for Visual Studio Code if you want to jump over to that and look at it.
Yeah. See, in the installed ones,
just about 10 minutes left here.
Oh yeah, I didn't even look at the time. Yeah, for some reason it's not liking my extension on VS for Mac. Okay, tell me about VS Code. Let me close this.
So on VS Code, there's a button that you will see right away on extensions. Now, if you just type in Telerik in there.
For a second, I'm going to close some of my workspaces because it's going to. Okay. Now it's a clean slate, extensions.
Telerik.
Oh, look at that.
And then you want the one for, I would do the Blazor productivity tools. Install on that. And then you might want to look in the, scroll down inside of the docs right there and see, I don't remember the command to get this up. So.
Yeah, so let's
type that. Yeah, Control-Shift-P once that is done.
Yeah, maybe the Command-Shift-P gives me all of the MAUI stuff. Is it called Telerik something?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you might have passed it. If you start typing,
oh, there it is. There it is. Telerik UI for Blazor template wizard. Yep. Yeah.
So nice. Just click on it real quick, Sam.
The launch wizard. Yep.
Yeah, launch the wizard just so you can see the wizard itself.
Yeah, nice.
It's really nice. It lets you pick the swatches that you want to use.
Dashboard.
The .NET versions that you have installed are listed there. you can switch between whether you have a paid or trial license, Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server. So it walks you through that. And then there's an admin dashboard template as well. So if you click on that, it might show you a preview. I can't remember if you get to see a preview or not. Okay, so maybe you don't get a preview there, but that one gives you like some pages to start with. That's really nice.
Yes.
Oh, and then also, when you installed this, you just also installed snippets. So you can type in the name of a component, hit tab, and it will auto-complete a kind of a demo version of that component. So it'll kind of have everything but like the data binding, like the model attached to it. So for a grid, for example, it'll stub out what you need, and then you can fill in some of the fields there and get going real fast.
Nice. And since VS for Mac is being retired, again, it's going to keep working until August of next year. We are going to look to build similar experiences for MAUI. Again, right now, there's nothing stopping you. You can, pull up a MAUI app and you can just bring in a Telerik reference and be, done with it. But we would like to have a similar experience to what, Blazor has. So, expect an extension that's going to work with VS Code as well.
Yeah, on Visual Studio for Windows, we already have the Blazor Hybrid template.
Yep, which also I don't seem to have installed on this VM. Too many VMs. I have it on my Windows box, which is also my streaming PC.
Yeah, on this you want to run the progress control panel and just install it all.
Yeah, it'll just get it all. Okay, so we talked about a whole bunch of things here today, and let's see. Let's look at the chat room one more time. See if you're missing anything. Thank you so much, folks, for
While you have the browser up, Sam, if you could go to telerik.com/webinars again. That's a good place to watch for the recordings to drop.
Yep.
So they all say register now, but if it's a completed webinar, I believe that changes.
Right.
We'll see links to the recordings for past webinars.
Yeah, it's right here. Yep. Cool.
Yeah,
you can watch the webinars. Yep. Oh, and look at that. I want to join the page. Yeah,
we'll
this is a good one to
mail out.
Yep.
When that is ready. So if you're registered already, it will be emailed to you. But if you're, telling a coworker that hasn't registered, just tell them to visit this page and check on it in about a week.
And I want to join the theme builder webinar. I want to learn because like all of your CSS styles, all of your custom Sass things, they are all welcome. Now the web and the native worlds are nicely coming together. We can, customize all we want and then bring it to native mobile and desktop. So we talked about a whole bunch of things today, just a lot. And I, in fact, like, what's a good place to say? Let's go to blogs.telerik.com and let's look at some of the ones that we looked at. So let's just do WPF to MAUI, something like that. Yep. So look around on the blogs. We have lots and lots of documentations on it. So my point is, see where you are at. Okay, if you are on Xamarin, then moving from Xamarin to MAUI, that's easy. Let's actually pull up the .NET Upgrade system one more time, and let's look through all of the code paths. Okay, so first thing is let's just stay here for the rest of the few minutes here. If you are on Xamarin.Forms and you're trying to go to MAUI, that's the easiest thing. Maybe not so easy if you have a very, very complex app. So take your time with migrations. I've heard things both ways. I've had a couple of super simple apps, which the Upgrade Assistant was fine to do on its own, but it's just a starting point. You will invariably have things to do manually. And I've also heard people who have just, kept the Xamarin.Forms app the way it is, start up a new .NET MAUI app and just bring things over manually. That way you have much more control over what's going on. Anything that you have in Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android, move it into the iOS or the Android folders in .NET MAUI and run with that. So hopefully Xamarin.Forms to MAUI is not a huge pain point for you, but again, you will have some work to do. If you're on WinForms, then your choices are to first try to make it run on a modern .NET, .NET 6 or 7 or 8 if you can, because the moment you do that, Blazor Hybrid is an option for you. Blazor UI can start lighting up some of the UI inside of your WinForms application. If you're on WPF, then you have a couple of choices. One is, again, you want to clean up your code bases the best you can. Excuse me. Always look at your dependencies. Same with Xamarin.Forms, same with WPF or WinForms. If you have a dependency, maybe a printer, maybe just a random thing that is very Windows specific, that is not letting you move forward, maybe you should reconsider how much you need that. Maybe you can write a plugin, make it a cross-platform abstraction, and then you can make it run on .NET 6 or 7 or 8. So WPF, you got a few, fork in the road. If you want to stay on WPF, then make it run on .NET 6 or 7 or 8. And then that's going to give you the Blazor option of doing Blazor Hybrid inside of WPF. And as you saw, you can render all types of, Blazor components and styles and routing, Telerik UI components all inside of WPF. Or if you really wanted to make it a cross-platform app, then you look at MAUI, and there is some guidance here from Blazor to MAUI because it's, or from WPF to MAUI because it's not, apples to apples. Most of your C# is reusable. Most of your XAML should also be reusable as long as you understand the difference in namespaces, the difference in layouts. So it's going to be a little bit of manual work, but it's very doable. And in terms of, UI component suites, our Xamarin suite was very full-featured. The MAUI suite is already at feature parity with Xamarin, if not more. But then the MAUI suite also caters heavily to desktop. Not quite as rich as WPF yet, because again, we have not had that many years, but we are iterating on that very, very quickly. So any type of modern desktop or modern mobile apps that you're building, hopefully it's cross-platform, and my vote would be to go with MAUI and see where things take you if you're migrating. So take it slow, take a deep breath, take your time as you're migrating, modernizing. There are lots of strategies in place. Figure out the best that works for your app and your code base. So I think that's about it. Ed, any final thoughts from you?
Nope, I think you covered it well, Sam, and we'll talk a little bit more about the upgrade assistant in our webinar next week on September 13th. But MAUI looks super interesting, and it's got a lot of inroads to check it out and migrate apps to it.
Yep, absolutely. So in the chat room, John was asking for the GitHub repo, which I'm guessing is my GitHub repo. So I can post that as a comment to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's just my GitHub repo. So some of the code that I showed you should be up there, so you can go check it out. For the upgrade assistant, they also have sample projects that you can try to upgrade on your own. Like a sample Xamarin.Forms or WPF project, and you can see how that's working out, and then you try doing your own. All right, folks, so it's been a few hours. For me, it's been, starting up early East Coast time, and it's well past my lunchtime now, so I'm getting hungry. I will go eat my lunch, and hopefully wherever you are at, you can go have lunch or a late supper if you're in Europe or other parts of the world. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Chat room has been busy, and Ed's been very good at answering things. So Ed, I want to thank you for spending 4 hours of your day with me on something you completely didn't have to, but I'll be lonely just by myself. It'll get lonely. All right.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
Good comments here all the way through from Dennis and John and everybody else. We appreciate your time a lot. And again, if you missed much of this, all of this will be recorded. We'll put this up. So have fun, take your time with migrations. It's good to have choices until sometimes we have too much of choice and then we get confused, but figure out the right stack that works for you. In terms of your UI, hopefully you see that we are here to help you be more productive. However you want to render Telerik UI for Blazor, for MAUI, for WPF, for WinForms, we have you covered and we are here for you. So have fun and good luck with your projects. And I think that's about it for us for this workshop. We'll see you around on the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, folks. Bye for now.